To all. In today's session, we are all going to learn about the monopolistic and oligopoly markets. So let's begin with the definition of monopolistic market. Monopolistic market is a market situation which follows the main features of perfect competition and monopoly market. It refers a market situation where there are large number of you can say buyers and seller who sells a closely related products that could be differentiated, that exactly called monopolistic competition. There are products where uh, includes in the monopolistic market such as the toothpaste, shampoo, soaps, etc. Let's take an example to understand the monopolistic market. The soap market enjoys a full competition where the firms having a different brands and have full freedom to entry into such industry and such market, which also shows of features of the perfect competition market. Every soap has different in colors, features, shape, which allow the firm to charge a different price for them, and that exactly called a monopolistic market where the products are closely related, that could be differentiated, and accordingly the firms charge a different prices for the products. Let's come to the next section, that is the main features of monopolistic market, where the first of the feature is the large number of seller, you can say product differentiation, freedom of entry and exit, selling cost, pricing strategies, lack of the perfect knowledge, and the high price, non-price competition. So let's have an overview of all of these features one by one. So the first one is the large number of sellers. So under the monopolistic competition, there are large number of sellers who sells a closely related products that can be differentiated. Or in other words, we can also talk about heterogeneous products. Every firm under this market uh, are independent and have a limited share of the market, and accordingly they could charge the market price market price of the product from the customers. Next feature is a product differentiation. It means differentiating the products of the market totally based on their brands, color, shape, size, etc. So differentiated among the products can be based either the real or the imaginary differences. And what would be the real and imaginary differences? So the real differences include the differences in the features of the product, in the shape, you can see flavor, warranty, after sales services. What would be the differences in all of these you can say real features of the product. But when we talk about the imaginary differences, it includes the differences that not really obvious to everyone. So that means, but the buyers, you can say, are made to believe by the firms that the products are to be differentiated, and which includes you can say selling cost or any other cost like the advertising or the promotion cost. For example, in cars, product differentiated firms could be the Ford, the Hyundai, and the Tata Motors. Next feature is freedom of entry and exit. The sellers under such competition market have a freedom of entry and exit, that any firm could enter into into monopolistic market, and they can exit also if any you can say profits are not to be earned by the same firms. And this is one of the feature which ensures that the abnormal profit and abnormal losses do not exist in the long run. Next one is the selling cost. The products under the monopolistic competition market are actually differentiated, and the firms are selling a closely related differentiated product. So whatever the information about these differentiated products is given to the buyers through the its selling cost, or which includes the advertising or the promotion cost. The firms also add such cost in the product so that they can convince the buyers to buy a specific brand of the product, so that once they pay for the you can say product, that the selling cost could also cover in it, and that to be pay back to the seller. So automatically it keeps that brand as their preferences over a competitor's brand. Next one is a pricing decision. The firms under the monopolistic competition are neither the price maker or nor the price taker, as the firm produce the unique or the differentiated products from each other, and each firm has a partial control over the price of the product, and accordingly they could charge the higher or the lower prices of the differentiated products from the customers. Next is the lack of perfect knowledge. So this is also the one of the feature of monopolistic competition, where the sellers and the buyers does not have a perfect knowledge about the market trends or condition. The selling cost is always added to the total cost of the product, which is to be manufactured by a monopolistic firm, and it could also create an artificial superiority in the consumer minds, which make it sometimes it make it difficult for them to evaluate that what would be the different products available in the market, and which product is more appropriate, you can say according to the features, quality, or you can say color or shape, as compared to the competitors' products or brands. Next one is a non-price competition. In monopolistic competitions, there exists not only the price competition but also a non-price competition. So the non-price competition means it's competing with the other firms by offering them the coupons, the allowances, the discount, or in other words, we can say offer the better credit terms as compared to the competitors' terms. So it is done by the firms without charging any prices of the product. Now these are the industries which includes the features of the monopolistic competition. The first one is the clothing and apparel. Second is the sportswear products. Restaurants is also follow the you can say such market or the features of the monopolistic markets. Hairdresser is also comes or follows the features of such market. PC manufacturers, we can talk about personal computers manufacturers, where large market is always exist in India, and it follows the few features of the monopolistic competition as well. Next one is the television services too, which you can see where the plenty of services are to be provided to the buyers, including subscriptions or the OTT platforms, which is to be provided on the television. So that could be you can say follows the features of the monopolistic competition. Now we can come up to the next section, that is the demand curve under monopolistic competition. As there are large number of buyers and sellers under such market who sells the differentiated products in the market. As a result, it makes the demand curve of such market is downward sloping. It means the monopolistic firm can sell more products or output when it reduces its price. That means we can also talk about the selling of more product which is totally based on the prices changes, and this concept can be understood with the help of the shape of the demand curve which comes under the monopolistic competition. So let's have an overview through the diagrammatic representation that how it looks like. So this is a diagrammatic representation of the demand curve under the monopolistic competition, which shows the inverse relationship between the price and the quantity demanded or the output in units. As shown in the above demand curve, the output of the firm under such market is measured on the x-axis and the price or the revenue is measured on the y-axis. At the OP price, which is an original price, the seller of the monopolistic market can sell OQ units. So as the price decreases, automatically the output would become would increase in the market, and as a result the demand curve slopes downward under the monopolistic competition, or in other words the demand curve under the monopolistic competition has a negative slope, or they can sell more and more products only when the price reduces or decreases. And that is the main reason when any two variables have a negative slope, as a result the demand curve of such market will become downwards. Now we can come up to the next concept, that's called a short run equilibrium under monopolistic competition. So where we can also talk about that there are three main situations which refers to economic profit, economic loss, or the break-even point. So when we talk about the monopolistic competition, the profits are maximized when the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost, and there is a point where the company equilibrium output could be achieved at that point where the particular marginal cost, you can say, intersect to the average total cost and the average revenue, which is always equals to the marginal revenue, demand, and price. So the price is determined at a point where the imaginary lines from the equilibrium output passes through the point of the interaction of the marginal revenue and the marginal cost, and of course it could also means the average total cost or the average revenue, which ultimately refers to a demand curve, which is called a downward sloping curve when we talk about the average revenue curve, and which is equals to the demand curves as well. And as a result, when marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue, and automatically it intersects to the average revenue and the marginal revenue, or the equal or the demand curve, then ultimately it refers to an economic profit, where you can see in the rectangular in color, in the purple, in the light green color, where the total profit it's represented by the, you can see, it's colored in a rectangular shape in the diagram, which refers to a B C D, which is a economic profit, you can say, in the short run period under the monopolistic competition. The next concept is the economic loss. So automatically when we talk about the economic loss, where the average revenue and the marginal revenue curve has been drawn, and the marginal cost and the average total cost has also been drawn, where the marginal cost intersect the average revenue curve and the marginal revenue curve, and where the marginal cost and the marginal revenue intersect, that point will become an equilibrium point. So where the average total cost curve, you can say, cuts the average revenue curve, that point will also reaches to a new equilibrium point that could be called E1. So the companies in monopolistic competition determine their prices and output decisions in the short run, as the companies do in the monopoly. So the companies who are actually exist in the monopolistic competition, or who follow the features of the monopolistic competition, can also incur the economic losses in the short run, as there is a condition where the no abnormal profits or abnormal losses exist in the long run. So as a result, the economic losses exist in the short run, so as it is illustrated in the diagram as well. So as the equilibrium reaches to a new equilibrium, and automatically when it reaches to the new equilibrium, which cuts the you can say average total cost and the average revenue, that becomes the rectangular shape which has been covered in the light blue color, that refers to the economic losses. So they still produce the equilibrium output at a point where the marginal cost intersect the marginal revenue, where the losses could be minimized. But when it reaches to a new equilibrium, whereas the exact area of the economic loss has been shown in the cyan colored rectangular, which refers to the losses, and it could be minimized by following up a strategies by the monopolistic firm, that how it could be minimized and what strategies has to be followed to reduce such losses in the short period or the short run. The next section is a long run decisions on output and price. When we talk about in the long run, the companies in monopolistic competition still produce at that level of period, that level of output where the marginal cost and the marginal revenue are equal. So ultimately, when the marginal revenue and marginal cost are equal, the demand curve shifts to the left due to the other companies entering into the market. So automatically it slopes downward as the shifts in the demand curve is a result of the reduced demand for the individual company products due to the increased competition. And when the when the demand shifts to the left and downward slope, it's just due to the result of the increased competition, or and such for such reasons it could be happen that the particular demand for a product decreases due to the increase in the prices. So this is a diagram where the in the long run the situation occurs when there is no profit or losses exist in the market. So as you can see, when the long run marginal cost curve cuts the marginal revenue, that point will become an equilibrium point. And when the you can say long run average total cost curve intersect the average long run marginal cost, then that point where the equilibrium point, where the you can say the vertical line has been drawn, and it intersect where the long run average total cost curve intersect the you can say average revenue curve, and that point will become a break even point or zero economic profit, because that point will be an equilibrium point and the price would remain the same, that is OP. So in the long run, there are plenty of companies who are actually under the monopolistic competition or follow the features of the monopolistic competition. Still, they can produce at a level where the marginal cost equals to the marginal revenue, and the demand curve will shift to the right, and the demand curve which also equals to the marginal revenue or average revenue or equals to price. So automatically the demand curve will shift to the left due to other companies entering the market, and such shift would exist due to the increased competition. And when there is an increased competition, then such action will be considered by the monopolistic firm, and it reaches to a you can say break even point where the economic profit has been reduced while the new players are entered into a monopolistic market, where the individual companies will no longer to be able to sell the products of the above average cost. So when we talk about the above average cost, this situation doesn't exist in the break even analysis. So the companies in monopolistic competition will earn zero economic profit in the long run. At this stage, they have an incentive for the new entrants or for the new entries in the industry. So when we talk about zero economic profit, where the long run average total cost curve you can say touches the marginal revenue, and where the marginal revenue intersect the marginal cost curve, and automatically that point will become equilibrium, and that when the equilibrium point has been achieved, that means OQ and OP are the original prices and original quantities, and then when such equilibrium point which shown in the vertical line which intersect the marginal revenue and average cost curve, that point will could be called a zero economic profit, where the companies are not exactly facing any sort of economic profits or economic losses, and that becomes a zero economic profit. Now we can come up to the next section, that what is the difference between the perfect competition and monopolistic competition. So the first one is the product. The difference of the product differences when we talk about the features, the one of the feature is called product. And in case of the perfect competition, homogeneous products are actually you can say sold by the sellers in the perfect competitive market. But in case of the monopolistic, differentiated you can say products are actually referred by the monopolistic firm. Number of firms, the another aspect is the number of firms, where a very large number of, you can say, buyers and sellers exist. And when we talk about monopolistic, there are many sellers and buyers are also exist. Price control firms are the price takers in the more perfect competitive market. They have no control over the prices. But when we talk about the monopolistic competition, the firm you can say are the price makers, and of course have some partial control over the prices. Let's talk about the demand curve. It's perfectly elastic. We can also talk about the horizontal curve, but when we talk about the monopolistic, it's called a downward sloping or a negative slope. Barriers to entry, they are very low barriers has been put on, and of course when we talk about the monopolistic, it's low barriers. Long run profit, zero economic profit due to the free entry, and again in case of the monopolistic, zero economic profit due to the free entry. So as in both markets there are large number of buyers and sellers, and as a result both in there is a break-even situation is always exist when the new players are entered into the industry. Next one is a competitive type. It's a primarily based on the prices, but the price and the non-price competition is refers in the monopolistic market because it includes the advertising and promotional activities as well. And in case we can also talk about branding. Efficiency, that means allocately efficient. It could be when the price is equals to the marginal cost. It's not allocated efficiency because the price is more than the marginal cost. As the price increase or decreases, you can say according to the marginal cost. Now we can come up to the next section, that is the inefficiencies in monopolistic competition. As in the long run, the equilibrium output, which refers to a profit maximization condition where the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. It means consumers pay more prices, you can say when the price is greater than the marginal revenue. As you can see in the diagram, where in the long run there is a insufficient you can say allocated, where the price is more than the marginal revenue. So automatically when we talk about the monopolistic competitive companies, will always operate with excess capacity, and they do not operate when there is a minimum average total cost in the long run, because after all, the companies have to look after the production capacity, which is not at the full capacity, because the idle resources are also available in the firms. So monopolistic competitive companies always waste the resources on the selling cost, promotional activities, advertising, marketing to promote their products, and as a result, when such cost you can say utilized in the production to reduce the production cost, then ultimately they have to reduce the prices, and if they have to reduce the prices, so somehow there is a situation when the firms earns the break even point, and that situation which ultimately leads to a insufficient allocated resources in case of the monopolistic competition. And since the companies do not operate at excess capacity, so it leads to unemployment and the social dependency, you can say, in the society. Inefficient companies always continue to exist under monopolistic competition when there is a feature where the firms can enter and exit from the market, and sometimes it is also associated with the feature of the perfect competition. So another scope of the inefficiency for the monopolistic competitive market is that the marginal cost is less than the price in the long run. So monopolistic competitive market structure are also referred as an insufficient because the prices are higher than the marginal cost and the marginal revenue, and that's why in the long run the monopolistic firm faces the insufficient or inefficient allocation of resources. That means there is a shortage of resources, or there are no resources available, or there are idle resources available rather than no resources. The next is the limitations of the monopolistic competition market structure. So the companies with the superior brands or high quality products will consistently make economic profits in the real world. But where the new companies who are entered into the market will take a long time to catch up, and their products sometimes may not match with the expectations of the customers, or where with the expectation of the established companies in the same market for their products, which having a close substitutes. So new companies are likely to face the barriers to entry because of the strong brand differentiation and the brand loyalty. So the more and more customers are loyal with that brand, because that particular brand is differentiate as compared to the competitors, and that means they're easily entered into the in this market, but the new entrants will not be possible to enter because they need a strong brand differentiation and the loyalty. The next section is a group equilibrium in monopolistic competition. The concept of the group equilibrium is introduced by the Chamberlain group equilibrium, which represents that the price and the output of organizations having a close substitutes of products. Due to the product differentiation, it would be difficult to form a market demand schedule and supply, because in the group equilibrium we need to form a market demand schedule and supply, and automatically when the products are differentiated, it could be difficult to form the market demand. So it could be refers to all those organizations where the products are closely a substitute including the price and output of it. So the price and output equilibrium of all the organization are known as group equilibrium. Let's talk about the Chamberlain assumptions of group equilibrium. He assumed that the demand and cost curves of all the products forming the group are the same or uniform. That means a uniformity is always been assumed in the group equilibrium under monopolistic market. So the assumption is termed as a uniformity assumption. So according to this assumption, the preferences of the consumers are evenly distributed and the differences in preferences not that much effect to give rise in the changes or the variations in the cost. He also assumed that in monopolistic competition, a large number of sellers are not able to influence each other decisions. So there is no influence of any of the decisions from the opposite or the former side. So this implies if the organization making any changes in the prices or the level of output, they would have insignificant influences in the on you can say on its competitors. So if we talk about such type of assumption, can also call a symmetric assumption. Let's talk about the short run group equilibrium. So when we look up the diagram where the short run marginal cost curve intersect the marginal revenue, and that point would called an equilibrium point, and from the equilibrium point the profit you can see generated in a rectangular shape. So when we talk about the new equilibrium point where the short run average marginal cost just drawn above the marginal revenue and cut the average revenue curve, and automatically the short run marginal cost intersect all of the curves that refers to a marginal revenue, average revenue, and the short run average cost. So when the marginal revenue intersect the short run marginal cost, it's called an equilibrium point, that's called E. And when there is a rise you can say in the prices, then it reaches to a new equilibrium point, and that's called a point P. And the equilibrium point, we can also refer the name of that equilibrium point called T. So automatically you can see the original output would be the OM and the original price would be the OY. So automatically when we talk about the OY, so when the price you can say or the revenue would get increases, then ultimately a new you can say shape would drive, and it leads to a you can say the rectangular shape that's called the economic profits in the long run, or in other words we can also call a supernormal profits you can say, or the you can say supernormal or abnormal profit would exist the situation in the short run group equilibrium. So in the figure 5 you can see P is the equilibrium point where the output is OM and the price is the MP and the average cost is the MT. In such a case, when the marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue, hence the organization are earning the supernormal profits, and that could be called P dash P, you can say T or T dash. So automatically when we talk about this rectangular you can say colored shape, that would refers to a you can say abnormal profit or the supernormal profits. So these supernormal profits you can say disappear in the long run. So when we talk about in the short run, supernormal or abnormal profits could earn, but in the long run it could disappear immediately, because in the long run group equilibrium and the concept of the group equilibrium do not exist. The next is the long run equilibrium. So when we talk about the long run equilibrium, as I said earlier, the abnormal profits are disappear in the long run. So in that case, in the long run group equilibrium, there is a situation of break even point where the such industry, monopolistic industry, could face a situation of no profit, no loss, or a break even point in case of the group equilibrium. So long run group equilibrium is also a situation where the supernormal profit will immediately disappear in the long run. So in this figure 6, it also shows that the long run average cost curve, which implies that the price is equal to the average revenue and the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost at the output level of OM. So this shows that in the long run, all organizations in the industry are making normal profits. That could be a situation of no profits, no abnormal profits, or no abnormal losses. So automatically it leads to a position that the organization holds, that could be earn only normal profits in the long run. The next concept is the equilibrium with selling cost. So the equilibrium with selling cost is reached when the marginal revenue from selling cost is equal to the marginal cost of those costs. That means marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost depending upon the selling cost and the cost which is being used in case of the production. So both have to be balanced with the marginal revenue and the cost of production. The firms will always continue to increase the selling cost, and ultimately it shifts the demand curve to the right as additional revenue is generated, which is more than the additional expenditure. And such process, when this situation arises and such process would exist, then a new equilibrium could be achieved where the price, output, and the selling cost are set to maximize the profits or leads to a profit maximization stage. How selling cost affect equilibrium? Due to the demand shift, as I told earlier, that the selling cost like advertising which all or marketing which aims to influence the consumer preferences, and ultimately it shifts the demand curve to the right, which indicating that more and more product could be sold at a given price. Next is when the demand would shifts to the right, then ultimately it refers to maximize the profit. So in the monopolistic competitive market, the profit could be increased by increasing the selling cost till that point when the marginal revenue gain from the last a rupee or a dollar spent on the selling cost, and which equals to the marginal cost of that particular rupees or dollar. So automatically when increases the selling cost where the marginal revenue you can see equals to the marginal cost, and they have to maintain the balance between the selling cost and the cost of production. The next one is the impact on price and output, as there is an increase in the selling price which leads to both a higher equilibrium price and a higher equilibrium output. So when the selling cost increases, automatically the equilibrium price and the equilibrium output would get increase, and when the selling cost declines, both will declines. So this is how the you can see such relationship exists in a case of the changes in the equilibrium due to the increase or decrease in the selling cost. So next few reasons that why it affects and how it affects how the selling cost affects the group equilibrium. So there are reasons behind it. Optimal level of spending. So if there is a optimum level of spending, that means the selling expenditure is more than the actual amount, then ultimately decreases the profits. So spending less will not maximize the potential profit. Next is diminishing returns. The effectiveness of the selling cost decreases when there is each additional dollar or rupee spent. It means the extra profit generated from each subsequent increase in sales gets smaller. Next is the equilibrium condition. What would be the equilibrium condition in case of you can say short run? So the equilibrium is reached when the firm has found the profit maximizing point. At this point, the marginal revenue, that means from any extra unit sold, which equals to the marginal cost, and the marginal revenue from each extra rupees or dollar of selling cost is also equals to the marginal cost of that rupees and dollar. That means marginal revenue is equals to the marginal cost, but automatically there is a condition that marginal revenue from any extra dollar or rupees of selling would also be equal to the marginal cost of that rupee or dollar. There is an example where imagine a firm that increases the advertising budget, and initially the increased demand from advertising it leads to the higher profits and sales, and automatically the firm will also continue to spend more in advertising as they believe that they could earn extra revenue as the new customers, you can say, increases the sales, and which is more than the average advertising cost. And the equilibrium point could have reached when the firm spent the last amount of rupees or dollar in advertising, and that rupees and dollar brings exactly the 1 rupee or dollar in additional revenue, or more specifically I could say the marginal revenue from the selling cost, which equals to the marginal cost of those costs. So when the marginal revenue which gained from the selling cost should also be equal to the marginal cost of those costs, including the variable or fixed cost or any selling or advertising cost or marketing cost. So that could be a example in case of the firm when they are willing to increase the advertising budget. Now we can come up to the equilibrium with selling cost, variable cost. So the selling cost influences the equilibrium price and output adjustment of the firm under the monopolistic competition. So in the below figure, uh, you can see average production cost is the initial average production cost. Average revenue is the initial average revenue curve or initial demand curve, and the initial price is the OP, and the firm earns profits shown by the first shaded rectangular, that's called PQRS, and that has been shown in the above diagram. PQRS. If you look up the original output OM and the original price OP, then automatically you can see a rectangular you can see shape which shows the profits, where the marginal you can say average production cost intersect to the average revenue. So automatically when the selling cost or you can say the production cost increases, then automatically the new equilibrium could be achieved. And as the new output and the new price is also being increased. That means reaches from OM to OM1 and the price from OP to OP1. When selling cost and the production cost increases, then it leads to another rectangular area which calls the P1, Q1, R1 and S1. As the firm has decided to increase the more and more selling cost above, you can say, above the earlier cost, then the firm reaches to a new equilibrium point, that is E2, while increasing the selling cost and the average production cost. Then ultimately a new or the higher profits would also be achieved, and as a result a new average revenue is also being equal to the demand curve. That means if you look up the demand curve where AR is equal to demand and price, then ultimately the demand shifts to the right. That means the firm is also earning the higher to higher profits by increasing the selling cost and the production cost. So automatically when the new profit rectangular has been generated, a new economic profit which refers to a new rectangular area, that's called the P2, or you can say P2, Q2, or you can say P dash, R dash 2 and S2. So P2, Q2, R2 and S2 will be a new rectangular area which refers to a new economic profit or a higher economic profit than the above, where the you can say average revenue curve has been drawn and along with the average cost curves. So this is how the new average cost curves would be drawn, which includes the average production cost and the average selling cost. So automatically when we talk about these costs, it could refer to one of the factor where the demand curve will shift to the right, where when the firm has decided to increase the selling cost and the production cost, and a new output level and will be achieved where the OM to OM1 to OM2 due to a increase in prices from OP to OP1 to OP2. It's just due to a one fact, the firm is increasing the selling and the production cost, and due to which this shapes the shifts to the right. Now we can come up to the next concept, that is equilibrium with selling cost includes fixed cost. So in the previous slide we are referring the equilibrium with selling cost, variable cost. But in this slide we are actually learning about the equilibrium with selling cost including fixed cost only. So in the modern times, a plenty of money or the hefty amount is spent on the selling cost. So it's become difficult sometimes to determine the most profitable output. So at the same time, we should also aware that the selling cost create a new demand curve, and hence the equilibrium is determined when there are fixed selling cost and there is no changes as any selling cost at all when it comes to reach the equilibrium point. So this is a diagram. If you look up the diagram where the average revenue curve has been drawn, marginal revenue curve has been drawn where the marginal cost cuts or intersect at its minimum point, which calls the equilibrium point. We can also talk about the average production cost. We can also talk about the average total unit cost, which is a combination of the average production cost and the selling cost. So in this particular figure 9, average revenue is the average revenue or a demand curve, we could say. Marginal revenue is a marginal revenue curve. Average production cost, which is called APC, the shaded area B shows the selling cost. So if you look up the shaded area B, where it's a combination of the APC and the ATUC, which shows in the particular you can say area that refers to B. So automatically this shows by adding the more and more selling cost in the average production cost, it leads to an average total cost. So average total cost is refers to an average total unit cost, which is equal to the average production cost APC, and the SC is a selling cost. So when we talk about SC, it also refers to a net return per unit, while SQ is a price minus, you can say, SC, that's called the average total unit cost, and the OQ is the total level of output. That means the shaded area that called a PRCS is the maximum net return, and the OQSP is a total revenue minus total cost, that is OQCS. So this is how we can drive the shaded area, which refers to a maximum return, and total revenue from the shaded area minus the total cost, which has also been concluded from the shaded area. Along with that, and we can easily draw an equilibrium, we can easily reach to the equilibrium point with the selling cost, and where the fixed cost is always exist in such market. Now we can come up to one of the most important distinguish between the monopoly and the monopolistic competition. When there are the number of sellers, in case of the monopoly there are one monopoly, but in the monopolistic many sellers. Next is product. As in the monopoly, we can also talk about unique products, but there are with no close substitutes. But monopolistic, we talk about the differentiated products, but close substitute exists, like different brands of restaurants, different brands of cosmetics. Like we can talk about another feature, control over price. Here there is a high control over the price, but they have a limited control over the price, because after all the firm charge different prices in the this market, monopolistic market, and that's why it leads to limited control. Barriers to entry, high to you can say blocked entry would possible, but relatively it's free entry and exit in case of the monopolistic. Competition, here it's none or very little competition, but here in this there is an instance, but sometimes non-price you can say competition is also exist due to you can say advertising or the promotional activities. Next is a long run profit. Can anyone can leads to a supernormal profits in the long run, but it can earn only it can earn normal profits in the long run in case of the monopolistic competition. The next concept is excess capacity. Excess capacity is, you can say, it refers to an unutilized capacity, or in other words can idle resources. It is a situation occurs when a firm operate or producing output at less than the optimum level. So it could happen when there is a market of recession or increased competition, where the demand declines and the firms are forced to reduce their capacity as to in order to decrease the cost. Excess capacity is calculated using the minimum long-term average cost curve, which is not a short-term occurrence. So there is no excess capacity in the long run for a perfectly competitive market. There is an excess capacity situation in the monopolistic competition. You can say using the concept of the minimum long run average cost. Excess capacity under monopolistic competition. So there are few conditions where the long run marginal cost curve should also equal to the long run average cost curve at the minimum point, and the firms in the monopolistic competition has to look after the excess capacity, that nobody would get an incentive to produce an optimum output at a higher long run marginal cost, which also greater than the marginal revenue. Firms in the monopolistic competition can also operate below the optimum capacity, and they are much smaller in size and large in terms of the in terms of the, you can say, population or the work under the conditions of the excess capacity. So this is a situation in case of the excess capacity, where it refers to a optimum or where it refers to a, you can say, insufficient. So you can look where the marginal long run marginal cost curve intersect the long run average cost curve, which refers to an equilibrium point that could refers to an optimum quantity. So the firms under the monopolistic competition operate at the equilibrium point, we could say E1, where the output OQ1 is produced, and the demand curve is always being tangent to the long run average cost curve at point A. So it also refers a point where the long run marginal cost curve also intersects the marginal revenue curve. And in this point, at the point equilibrium, the firm cannot operate where the long run marginal cost curve intercepts the long run average cost curve at its lowest point, and the optimum output, that is OQ, is produced, and beyond the optimum output the firms will start making losses, because the long run marginal cost curve is more greater than the marginal revenue, and when it is greater than the marginal revenue, this scenario will lead to a excess capacity, which is represented by the Q dash Q. And the graph, which also reveals in the long run that as the output lowers, price would become higher under the monopolistic competition. So in this way, this refers to an overview of the excess capacity and reveals the concept of excess capacity under the monopolistic competition. Let's come to the new concept that's called oligopoly. Oligopoly is that market situation where there are a small number of large firms and hold a significant portion of the market share. There are few competitors and the firms have a, you can say, degree of control over the price and supply too. Let's take an example to understand this concept, oligopoly. The automobile market is one of the example of oligopoly, where there are few companies like Toyota, Ford and the General Motors produces the majority of the world cars, and it could be difficult where the new companies could enter and compete effectively in such market. That's all for today. Thank you so much for listening this lecture. I will come up to a more and more interesting and important topics in the upcoming session. So till time, thank you and namaste to all.
కొత్త పేపరు ప్రారంభిస్తున్నాము. అది నిజానికి మనము దేశ రాజకీయాలు, దేశ విధానం, దేశ పాలనా విధానం వీటన్నిటికంటే అది భిన్నంగా ఉంటుంది. దాన్ని మనము విదేశాంగ విధానం అంటాం. దేశీయ విధానం అంటే దేశీయ పరిస్థితుల్లో, దేశీయ సమాజంలో, దేశీయ ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థలో, దేశీయ ఆర్థిక రాజకీయ వ్యవస్థలో ఉండే విషయాల గురించి ప్రభుత్వము లేక రాజ్యము ఏదైతే ఉందో కొన్ని విధానాలను రూపొందిస్తుంది. దాన్ని మనము దేశీయ విధానం అంటాం. ఉదాహరణకి దేశీయ విధానము, దాని ప్రిన్సిపుల్స్, మరి దాని ఐడియాలజీ, సిద్ధాంతము నిజానికి ఒక రాజ్యాంగంలో వ్రాయబడి ఉంటుంది. ఆ రాజ్యాంగంలో ఉన్న విధానాలు, ఆ విధానాలు ఏ విధంగా అమలు చేయాలా, ఆ విధానాలు అమలు చేసేటప్పుడు వచ్చే సమస్యలను ఏ విధంగా పరిష్కరించాలా అనేది రాజ్యాంగంలో వ్రాయబడి ఉంటుంది. ఆ విధంగా ఆ విధానాన్ని బట్టి ప్రభుత్వాలు కూడా దాన్ని మలుచుకోవాలి. ప్రభుత్వాలు కూడా తన పాలనను రూపొందించాలా, పాలనని విధానాలని అమలు చేయాలి. ఇది ముఖ్యంగా దేశీయ విధానం అంటాం. సో దేశీయ విధానం, ఉదాహరణకి దేశీయ విధానం మన రాజ్యాంగంలో వ్రాయబడింది. దాని ప్రకారమే చట్టాలు చేయాలి, దాని ప్రకారమే మన క్యాబినెట్స్, దేశీయ క్యాబినెట్స్ మరియు రాష్ట్ర క్యాబినెట్స్ విధానాలు రూపొందించాలా, మరియు ఆ విధానాలను ఇంప్లిమెంట్ చేయాలి. సో దేశీయ విధానాన్ని ఈ విధంగా మన పరిస్థితులకు అనుగుణంగా ప్రజల యొక్క సంక్షేమం గురించి, ప్రజల యొక్క జీవితాల రక్షణ కొరకు, సంక్షేమం కొరకు రూపొందించబడి ఉంటుంది. అది రాజ్యాంగంలో వ్రాయబడుతుంది. అయితే ఫారిన్ పాలసీ, విదేశాంగ విధానం, ఫారిన్ పాలసీ అంటే నిజానికి ఏంటంటే ఒక దేశము తమ యొక్క భౌగోళిక రక్షణ కొరకు, తమ ప్రజల యొక్క సంక్షేమం కొరకు, తమ ప్రజల యొక్క ఆర్థిక మన జీవితానికి, సామాజిక జీవితానికి, రాజకీయ మనుగడికి అనుకూలంగా ఇతర దేశాలతో ఏ విధంగా మెదలాలా అనే విధానం ఏదైతే ఉందో, లేదా విధానాల సమూహం ఏదైతే ఉందో దాన్ని విదేశాంగ విధానం అంటాం. సో భారతదేశ విదేశాంగ విధానాన్ని గురించి చర్చించుకుందాం. ఇప్పుడే చెప్పినట్టు విదేశాంగ విధానము దేశీయ విధానం కంటే భిన్నంగా ఉంటుంది. దేశీయ విధానం ఎట్లా ఉంటుందంటే దేశ ప్రజల గురించి, ఆ దేశానికి సంబంధించిన రాజకీయ, సామాజిక, ఆర్థిక విషయాల గురించి ప్రభుత్వం రూపొందిస్తుంది. ఆ ప్రభుత్వము ముఖ్యంగా ఆ దేశ రాజ్యాంగాన్ని బట్టి ప్రభుత్వ విధానం రూపొందిస్తుంది. మన ప్రభుత్వంలో, దేశంలో కేంద్ర ప్రభుత్వము మరియు రాష్ట్ర ప్రభుత్వాలు దేశీయ విధానాన్ని చేస్తుంది, రూపొందిస్తుంది, అమలు చేస్తుంది. దీనికి భిన్నంగా విదేశాంగ విధానం ఏదైతే ఉందో, విదేశాంగ విధానము ఉద్దేశం, లక్ష్యం ఏంటంటే మన దేశాన్ని భౌగోళికంగా మరియు ఆర్థికంగా రక్షించుకోవడం. మన దేశాన్ని, ఒక దేశాన్ని అనుకోండి, మన దేశాన్ని తర్వాత మాట్లాడతాము, ఒక దేశం యొక్క మన భౌగోళిక రక్షణ, ఆర్థిక రక్షణ, ఆర్థిక సంక్షేమం, ఆర్థిక విధానాలకు అనుకూలంగా ఉండే, మరి సామాజిక కల్చరల్ రంగంలో కూడా మన దేశానికి అనుగుణంగా ఉండే విధానాన్ని, ఇతర దేశాలతో సంబంధాలను రూపొందించుకోవడం అనేది తప్పకుండా జరగాలి. అయితే ఇందులో విదేశాంగ విధానానికి సామాన్యంగా ఒక మన బేసిస్, మన సందర్భం, ఏ విధంగా విదేశాంగ విధానంలోని సిద్ధాంతము, ఏ విధంగా విదేశాంగ విధానంలోని ప్రిన్సిపల్స్ ఉంటాయో అవి ఏ విధంగా విధానంలోనికి వచ్చినాయి ప్రిన్సిపల్స్. ఉదాహరణకి మన భారతదేశం ఫ్రీడమ్ మూమెంట్, జాతీయ ఉద్యమంలో ఎటువంటి ప్రజల యొక్క రాజకీయ నాయకులు ఎటువంటి మన విలువలను, ఎటువంటి విధానాలను రూపొందించారు, ఎటువంటి విషయాల కొరకు జాతీయ ఉద్యమం నడిపారు. ఆ జాతీయ ఉద్యమం నడిపినప్పుడు ఎవరు మనకు సహకరించారు, జాతీయ ఉద్యమం నడిపినప్పుడు ఎవరు మనకు శత్రువులుగా ఉన్నారు, మనకు వ్యతిరేకంగా ఉన్నారు. జాతీయ ఉద్యమంలో మన వలని బాధపడుతున్న మరియు పీడించబడుతున్న దేశాలు ఇవి. ఆ దేశాలు ఏ ఖండంలో ఉన్నవి? ముఖ్యంగా మన దేశం, ఉదాహరణకి మన దేశంతో సహా ఆఫ్రికన్ కంట్రీస్, తర్వాత మరి ఇతర ఏషియన్ కంట్రీస్, నిజానికి మన దేశంతో సహా మన ఇది పీడనకు, తర్వాత మన డిపెండెన్స్కి, తర్వాత వలస పాలనకి నిజానికి సఫర్ అవుతుంది, బాధింపబడుతుంది అన్నట్టు. సో అయితే విదేశాంగ విధానం ఏ విధంగా రూపొందుతుంది అంటే ఆ స్వాతంత్ర పోరాటంలోని, స్వాతంత్ర ఉద్యమం కాలంలోని ఏ విధంగా ఎవరు స్నేహితులుగా ఉన్నారో, ఎవరు శత్రువులు ఉన్నారో అది సామాన్యంగా ప్రభుత్వం మన స్వాతంత్రం తర్వాత కూడా కొనసాగడానికి అవకాశం ఉంది. సో అలానే మన దేశంలో ఆ విధంగా జరిగిందన్నట్టు. సో మన దేశీయ విధానము, నిజానికి విదేశాంగ విధానము ముఖ్యంగా స్వతంత్ర పోరాటంలో, స్వతంత్ర ఉద్యమంలో ఏ విలువల కొరకు మన దేశ ప్రజలు, మన దేశ నాయకులు, రాజకీయ నాయకులు, ముఖ్యంగా గాంధీ, నెహ్రూ, వల్లభాయ్ పటేలు, సుభాష్ చంద్రబోస్ కూడా మనం కొంతవరకు నేర్చుకోవాలి. తర్వాత వీటన్నిటినీ మన ఉద్యమ పద్ధతిలో, ఉద్యమ ధోరణిలో నడిపింది కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ. సో కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ విదేశాంగ విధానము, కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ మన సిద్ధాంతంతోనే రూపొందించబడలేదు అనుకోవచ్చు. అది వేరే పార్టీ కూడా, మన కమ్యూనిస్ట్ పార్టీ, తర్వాత ఇది ఇంకొక కాంపోనెంట్ ఇది మన ముస్లిం లీగ్ కూడా మన విదేశాంగ విధానంలో విదేశాంగ విధానం రూపొందించడంలో నిజానికి మన కంట్రిబ్యూట్ చేసింది. అదే వాళ్ళ యొక్క వాదనలు, వాళ్ళ యొక్క మన ఏంటివి సంక్షేమము, అంటే ముస్లింల యొక్క మైనారిటీస్ యొక్క సంక్షేమం కూడా ఏ విధంగా మన చూసుకోవాలా అనేది మన విదేశాంగ విధానంలో చేర్చబడింది అని చెప్పొచ్చు. సో నిజానికి మన భారతదేశం యొక్క విదేశాంగ విధానము మన భారతదేశం మన స్వాతంత్రోద్యమం నుంచి పుట్టింది. స్వాతంత్రోద్యమం ఏ విలువలతో నడిచిందో, స్వాతంత్రోద్యమం ఏ విలువలతో నడిచిందో ఆ విలువలతోనే ఈ మన ఇతర దేశాలతో సంబంధాలు ఏ విధంగా ఉండాలా అనే విషయాన్ని రూపొందించడము నిర్ణయించబడిందని చెప్పొచ్చు. సో ఉదాహరణకి జాతీయ ఉద్యమము టైంలో ఫస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ఆల్ జాతీయ ఉద్యమాన్ని సమర్థించిన కంట్రీస్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ బ్రిటిష్ జాతీయ ఉద్యమం ఎవరికి వ్యతిరేకంగా జరిగింది? డైరెక్ట్గా బ్రిటిష్ సామ్రాజ్యవాదానికి, బ్రిటిష్ వలస విధానానికి, బ్రిటిష్ మన దేశంలో ఉండటాన్ని కంటిన్యూ కావడానికి నిజానికి వ్యతిరేకంగా జరిగిందన్నట్టు. ఆ కాలంలో నిజానికి అమెరికా మనకు సహాయపడింది. అమెరికా మన స్వాతంత్రాన్ని మన సమర్థించింది. తర్వాత రష్యా అసలు సోషలిస్ట్ విధానం సోషలిస్ట్ విధానాన్ని అనుసరించి ఒక ప్రభుత్వాలు ఏర్పరిచిన రష్యా నిజానికి మన భారతదేశ స్వతంత్ర పోరాటాన్ని కూడా సమర్థించింది. ఇక్కడ కూడా సోషలిస్ట్ విధానాన్ని మన అప్పటి సోషలిస్టు ప్రభుత్వము, అవసరం సోషలిస్ట్ విధానం. సో అదేవిధంగా మన దేశము ఇతర దేశాల స్వతంత్ర పోరాటంలో మన ఇంటర్ఫిర్ అయ్యి జోక్యం చేసుకొని ఇతర దేశాలు కూడా స్వతంత్ర దేశాలు, అస్వతంత్ర దేశాలు, వలస పాలన కింద ఉన్న దేశాలకు కూడా సమర్థన తెలపడం జరిగింది. సో అదే నిజానికి ఈ స్వతంత్ర విధానాలన్నీ ఈ విధంగా ఈ విలువలను స్వతంత్ర పోరాటంలో, విదేశాంగ విధానాలు ఎవరు రూపొందించారు, ఎవరి వల్ల ఇది సాధ్యమైంది అంటే నిజానికి ముఖ్యంగా మన దేశంలో గాంధీ, నెహ్రూ మరియు అంబేద్కర్ కూడా, తర్వాత వచ్చిన అంబేద్కర్ కూడా చేసిన తర్వాత వల్లభాయ్ పటేల్ తర్వాత ఈ విదేశాంగ విధానాన్ని రూపొందించడం జరిగింది. అయితే ఈ మన విదేశాంగ విధానంలోని ముఖ్య సూత్రాలు ఏంటివి అంటే గాంధీ, నెహ్రూ మరియు వల్లభాయ్ పటేల్ చేసిన మన మన విదేశ విధానానికి కంట్రిబ్యూట్ ఎట్లా ఏం చేశారు అంటే, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ గాంధీ ప్రజల యొక్క సంక్షేమం, తర్వాత ప్రజల యొక్క మన ఒక దేశం యొక్క ప్రజల యొక్క స్వాతంత్రము, ప్రజల యొక్క సంక్షేమం, తర్వాత ప్రజలు ఆ ప్రజలైతే ఉన్నారో ఆ దేశం నిజానికి కూడా స్వతంత్రం ఉండాలా అంటే ఫ్రీడమ్ ఆఫ్ నేషన్స్ అనేది ముఖ్య సూత్రము. మరియు ఆ ఫ్రీడమ్ ఆఫ్ ద నేషన్స్కి ఆ దేశంలోని ప్రజలకు అస్వతంత్రంగా ఉండడము, తర్వాత ఇంకా వేరే దేశాలకు బానిసలుగా ఉండడము, వేరే దేశాల కింద ఉండడము నిజానికి అది ఆ దేశం ప్రజల యొక్క సంక్షేమానికి మంచిది కాదు, ఆ దేశ యొక్క ప్రజలకు వ్యతిరేకంగా ఉంటుంది. కాబట్టి అది స్వతంత్ర దేశాలుగా ఉండాలి, ఇతర దేశాల నుంచి స్వతంత్ర దేశంగా ఉండాలి. అదేవిధంగా సామ్రాజ్యవాదము ఎంత తొందరగా మన పోతే, ఎంత తొందరగా వెళ్ళిపోతే, ఇంత తొందరగా మన పోరాటంలో ఓడిపోతే అంత మంచిది అని మన ముఖ్య జాతీయ నాయకుడైన గాంధీజీ భావించారు. అదేవిధంగా స్వతంత్ర పోరాటములో మన నెహ్రూ కూడా అదే విషయాలకు కట్టుబడి ఉన్నాడు. స్వతంత్రము అంటే దేశీయ స్వాతంత్రము, ప్రజల సంక్షేమం అనేవి నిజానికి కావాలంటే వలస పాలన పోవాలా అని మన నెహ్రూ కూడా భావించాడు. అదేవిధంగా వల్లభాయ్ పటేల్ తర్వాత ఇంకా ఇతరులు కూడా మన వివిధ శాఖల్లో తర్వాత నిజానికి స్వతంత్రం వచ్చిన తర్వాత వివిధ శాఖల్లో పనిచేశారు. అయితే వీళ్ళు కూడా వల్లభాయ్ పటేల్ కూడా నిజానికి ఈ స్వతంత్ర ఉద్యమంలో మన ఇట్లా ఏ విధంగా మిలిటరీని రూపొందించాలా, మిలిటరీ ఏ విధంగా మన ఆర్గనైజ్ చేయబడాలా అనేది మన వల్లభాయ్ పటేల్ తర్వాత మిలిటరీ విధానాలలో అంటే విదేశాలతో ఏ విధంగా మెదలాలా, విదేశాలతో ఏ విధంగా మెదలాలా, విదేశ విధానంలో ఎటువంటి నిర్ణయాలు తీసుకోవాలా, తర్వాత మన నైబరింగ్ స్టేట్స్ మన పక్కన ఉన్న ప్రక్క దేశాలతో ఏ విధంగా మన దేశం మెదలాలా అనే విషయాలలో ముఖ్యంగా మన వల్లభాయ్ పటేల్ ముఖ్య పాత్ర వహించాడు అని చెప్పాలి. అంటే దాని అర్థం ఏంటంటే గాంధీ, నెహ్రూ, వల్లభాయ్ పటేల్ మధ్యన వీళ్ళు పర్సనల్గా కొన్ని విధాలు ఉన్నా వాళ్ళు కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ మొత్తం అల్టిమేట్గా ఈ విదేశాంగ విధానాన్ని నిర్ణయించిందన్నట్టు. సో ఇది ఉద్యమం. అయితే ఇందులో గాంధీ, నెహ్రూ, వల్లభాయ్ పటేల్ అయినా తర్వాత దళిత లీడర్స్ కూడా, అంబేద్కర్ కూడా మన భారతదేశ అంటే లాస్ట్ డేస్ ఆఫ్ ఫారెన్ మూమెంట్లో కూడా మన మన అంబేద్కర్ నిజానికి గాంధీ మన భారతదేశ విదేశాంగ విధానాన్ని రూపొందించడంలో ముఖ్య పాత్ర వహించాడని చెప్పాలి. అయితే ఇందులో మన భారతదేశంలో ఉన్న వివిధ సామాజిక వర్గాలు ఏదైతే ఉన్నాయో, వివిధ మైనారిటీస్ ప్రజలు ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో వాటిని కూడా మనం కొంతవరకు ఇందులో చర్చించవలసి ఉంటుంది. ఏ విధంగా మనము ముస్లిమ్స్ ఏ విధంగా భారతదేశంలో ఉన్నారో వాళ్ళ సంక్షేమం ప్రకారము వాళ్ళకు అనుగుణంగా వాళ్ళు ఇతర దేశం యొక్క ముస్లింలతోని మన సంబంధాలు పెట్టుకోవడము, వాళ్ళ యొక్క ఇతర ముస్లిం దేశాల యొక్క అనేక విషయాల్లో సహకరించడానికి కూడా మన భారతదేశ విదేశాంగ విధానము అని ఉండాలా అని నిజానికి నిర్ణయించబడింది. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, ఇఫ్ our Muslims go to Islamic countries, there would not be any our foreign policy will be favorable to such people, such activities, such relations. So our country should have, ఎందుకంటే మన విదేశాంగ మన స్వాతంత్ర పోరాటంలో మన యాంటీ కలోనియల్ మూమెంట్లో నిజానికి ఒక స్టేజ్లో ముస్లిమ్స్ అండ్ ఇండియన్స్ కలిసి యునైటెడ్గా మన కొన్ని ఖిలాఫత్ మూమెంట్ అనే ఒకటి ఉంది. ఆ ఖిలాఫత్ మూమెంట్లో దానికి హిందువులు ముస్లిమ్స్ కలిసి ఆ ఖిలాఫత్ లీడర్స్కి సపోర్ట్ చేశారు. సో ఈ విధంగా అనేక విషయాలు అంటే సామాజిక సోషల్ స్ట్రక్చర్స్ బట్టి కూడా విదేశ విధానం రూపొందించబడుతుంది. ఏ విధంగా మన దేశంలో చాలామంది ముస్లిమ్స్ ఉన్నారు కాబట్టి ఆ ముస్లిమ్స్కి సామాన్యంగా వేరే ముస్లిమ్స్ దేశాలతో అక్కడ ప్రజలకి కొంచెము లాయల్టీ ఉంటుంది. అక్కడ జరిగే విషయాలు, అక్కడ జరిగే సంఘటనలు ముస్లిమ్స్ వ్యతిరేకంగా ఉంటే ఇక్కడ ముస్లింలు అక్కడ సపోర్ట్ చేస్తారు. ఆ విధంగా మన ముస్లిమ్స్ వాళ్ళకి సపోర్ట్ చేస్తే మన ప్రభుత్వం, మన దేశము నిజానికి దానికి సింపతిగా ఉండాలి. సో మన దేశం విధానం కూడా సింపథెటిక్ ఉండాలి. ఏది విదేశంగా విధానాల్లో నిజానికి ఆ ప్రజలు ఏ ప్రజలైతే బాధింపబడుతున్నారో వాళ్ళకి అనుకూలంగా మన దేశము మన పరిపాలన దానికి అనుగుణంగా ఉండాలి. సో ఈ విధంగా అయితే మన విదేశ విధానము స్వాతంత్రోద్యమ విలువలు, స్వాతంత్ర ఉద్యమంలో ముఖ్యంగా నిర్ణయించబడిన అంశాలు, సిద్ధాంతాలు నిజానికి స్వతంత్రం ఏర్పడ్డ తర్వాత కూడా అవి కొనసాగినాయి. అదే ఏ విధంగా కొనసాగినాయి అంటే సామాన్యంగా ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ మనం భారతదేశము స్వాతంత్రం వచ్చిన తర్వాత కూడా వలస విధానానికి వ్యతిరేకంగా మాట్లాడడంలో, సంబంధాలలో మిత్రత్వం ఉండొచ్చు, కానీ ముఖ్యంగా ప్రిన్సిపల్స్లో మాత్రం వ్యతిరేకత. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ బ్రిటిష్ పోయిన తర్వాత కూడా బ్రిటిష్ వాళ్ళతో సంబంధాలు ఉన్నాయి, కానీ వాళ్ళ యొక్క వలస విధానానికి మాత్రం వ్యతిరేకించినాము. అది బ్రిటిష్ వాళ్ళు కానీ, అమెరికన్స్ కానీ, ఫ్రెంచ్ వాళ్ళు కానీ, తర్వాత ఇతర వలస దేశాలు కూడా ఈ ఆఫ్రికాలో ఉన్న మన స్వతంత్రం లేని దేశాలు, తర్వాత మన ఏషియాలో స్వతంత్రం లేని విషయాల ప్రజలకి మన దేశము నిజంగా కంటిన్యూ చేసింది. ఉదాహరణకి అయితే మన దేశ విధానానికి దానికి ఇతర దేశాలు, పెద్ద దేశాలు కానీ, చిన్న దేశాలు కానీ, కొన్ని స్వతంత్ర మన డెమోక్రాటిక్ దేశాలు, డెమోక్రసీ బుర్జువా దేశాలు, తర్వాత కొన్ని మన సోషలిస్ట్ దేశాలు, ఈ వట్టి సిద్ధాంతమే కాకుండా నిజానికి వాళ్ళ స్వతంత్రాన్ని సమర్థించే అన్ని రకాల దేశాలు మన దేశం యొక్క విధానాన్ని, మన యొక్క విదేశం విధానాన్ని సమర్థించినాయి. తర్వాత అట్లా సమర్థించిన వాళ్ళు కూడా మనకి ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ మన విదేశాంగ విధానంలో క్లోజ్గా సపోర్ట్ చేసినది రష్యా, అంటే అప్పటి సోవియట్ యూనియన్. ఎందుకంటే కొన్ని స్వతంత్రంగా ఏర్పడిన తర్వాత మన ఆర్థిక విధానము, మన సామాజిక విధానము నిజానికి రష్యాకు పోలి ఉంటుంది, రష్యాకు దగ్గరగా ఉంటుంది. ఎలా అంటే రష్యాలో ప్లాన్డ్ ఎకానమీ, ప్లాన్డ్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్, ప్లాన్డ్ సోషల్ పాలసీ ఉండేదన్నట్టు. సో ముఖ్యంగా ఆ ప్లాన్డ్ సోషలిజం కూడా సోషలిస్ట్ ప్రిన్సిపల్కి అనుగుణంగా ఉండేది. సోషలిస్ట్ సిద్ధాంతాన్పై ఆధారపడి ఉందన్నట్టు. సో మొత్తము అంటే రష్యాలో సోవియట్ యూనియన్లో ఏ విధంగా ఉందో అదే విధంగా బట్టి మక్కి తర్వాత కాపీ కొట్టి కాకుండా కొంతవరకు మార్చి మన దేశంలో మిక్స్డ్ ఎకానమీ, సోషలిస్ట్ మరియు క్యాపిటలిస్ట్ విధానాన్ని రూపొందించడం జరిగింది. సో ఆ విధంగా ఒక మిక్స్డ్ ఎకానమీ మొదలు మన ఏమంటుందని రూపొందించడంలో, తర్వాత అమలు చేయడంలో నిజానికి రష్యా మరియు దాని తర్వాత అమెరికా కూడా నిజానికి చాలా సహాయం చేసింది. సో మనకు వాళ్ళు సహాయం చేశారు కాబట్టి మన విదేశాంగ విధానము రష్యాకు అనుకూలంగా, సోవియట్ యూనియన్ అప్పటికి యూనియన్ ఆఫ్ సోవియట్ సోషలిస్ట్ రిపబ్లిక్స్ ఇది 1990 వరకు ఉన్నది. అప్పుడు మన అర్లీ పీరియడ్లో 1950లో కూడా అది మన సోవియట్ యూనియన్కి మన సత్సంబంధాలు ఉన్నాయని చెప్పాలి. అయితే మన మన 1950లో అంటే స్వతంత్రం వచ్చిన తర్వాత వేరే దేశాలు మెల్లమెల్లగా అంటే పూర్తిగా ఇమీడియట్గా అమెరికా మన ఇది యూకే వెళ్ళిపోయినప్పుడు యూకే మన స్వతంత్రానికి ఇచ్చినప్పుడు ఇమీడియట్గా మన భారతదేశానికి సమర్థించకుండా కూడా మెల్లిమెల్లిగా ఎలాగో బ్రిటన్ పోయింది కదా, బ్రిటన్ పోయిన తర్వాత బ్రిటన్కి ఎందుకు సపోర్ట్ చేయాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు. ఇండియా ఒక స్వతంత్ర దేశంగా ఎమర్జ్ అయ్యి ముందుకు పోయిన తర్వాత దానికే సమర్థించాలా అని మన సామ్రాజ్యవాద దేశాలు అంటే డెవలప్డ్ నేషన్స్ కూడా నిజానికి ఇండియాకి సపోర్ట్ ఇచ్చినాయి. తర్వాత ఇండియా విదేశాంగ విధానాన్ని రూపొందించడంలో దాని ప్రభావం చూపింది. సో ఇది మన భారతీయ విదేశాంగ విధానం ఏర్పడ్డ సందర్భము. తర్వాత భారతీయ విదేశాంగ విధానము 1950 తర్వాత ఎట్లా ఉంది, 1950 to 1990 ఈ మధ్య కాలంలో ఒకే విధంగా ఉంది. కొన్ని మార్పులు చేర్పులు జరిగినా కూడా 1919 వరకు ఒక మన విదేశాంగ విధానం ఉంది. 1990 తర్వాత ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ మన ఇది కాంగ్రెస్ ప్రభుత్వంకు అంటే 1991 వరకు కాంగ్రెస్ ప్రభుత్వము మన రూపొందించి పాలించి అమలు చేసిన రాజ్యాంగ విధానం ఎట్లా ఉంది అంటే విదేశాంగ విధానం ఎట్లా ఉంది. దాని తర్వాత కొన్ని రోజులు మన మొరార్జీ దేశాయ్ ఆధ్వర్యంలో మొరార్జీ దేశాయ్ నాయకత్వంలో మన విదేశాంగ విధానం ఈ విధంగా ఉంది. దాని తర్వాత ఎకనామిక్ రిఫార్మ్స్ వచ్చిన తర్వాత మన విదేశాంగ విధానం ఏ విధంగా ఉంది. తర్వాత మన అంటే ప్రభుత్వాన్ని బట్టి విదేశాంగ విధానము నిజానికి వారు ప్రతి పార్టీ తమ యొక్క విదేశాంగ విధానము రూపొందించుకొని దానికి కట్టుబడి ఉంటుంది. వాళ్ళ అధికారంలోకి వచ్చిన తర్వాత ఆ విదేశాంగ విధానాన్ని అమలు చేయడం జరుగుతుంది అన్నట్టు. అది కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ మొట్టమొదటి నుంచి 1970 వరకు నిజానికి అధికారంలో ఉంది. కాబట్టి ఏ విధంగా మన ఇది స్వతంత్ర ఉద్యమంలో బయటపడి అమలు చేయబడి మన విదేశాంగ విధానం ఉందో ఆ విదేశాంగ విధానమే దానికి కొనసాగింది అని చెప్పవచ్చు. కానీ దాన్ని ఫస్ట్ నెహ్రూ కింద అనొచ్చు, ఇందిరాగాంధీ కింద అనొచ్చు. కానీ ఇందిరాగాంధీ పోయిన తర్వాత నిజానికి భారతదేశంలో ఒక రకమైన కొత్త మన ఒరవడి రాజకీయాల్లో కొత్త ఒరవడి వచ్చేటట్టు. అదేంటంటే నిజానికి మన కాంగ్రెస్ అనే పెద్ద పార్టీ 1960-70 వరకు ఏకఛత్రాధిపత్యం కలిగి ఉన్నా కూడా దాని తర్వాత ఆ 1970 నుంచి నిజానికి రీజనల్ పార్టీస్ ఏర్పడడం వల్ల రీజనల్ పార్టీస్ ఏర్పడి కొన్ని రీజనల్ పార్టీస్ మన ఏ రాష్ట్రాలు ఉన్నాయో అవి కొన్ని మాత్రము భారత ప్రభుత్వానికి కాంగ్రెస్ ప్రభుత్వానికి అనుకూలంగా ఉన్నాయి, కొన్ని మన భారత ప్రభుత్వానికి కాంగ్రెస్ ప్రభుత్వానికి వ్యతిరేకంగా ఉన్నాయి అని చెప్పొచ్చు. ముఖ్యంగా మన కాంగ్రెస్ ప్రభుత్వంలో కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ అధికారంలో ఉన్నప్పుడు మన కొన్ని పార్టీలు ముఖ్యంగా మన ఇది కమ్యూనిస్ట్ పార్టీస్ వెస్ట్ బెంగాల్లోను కేరళలోను త్రిపురలోను ఇవి నిజానికి ఈ మన కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ వ్యతిరేకించినాయి. కానీ చాలా ఇతర పార్టీలు నిజానికి కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీకి రీజనల్ పార్టీ అయినప్పుడు అది మన అసలు కాంగ్రెస్ ఏకఛత్రాధిపత్యం ఉన్నప్పుడు చాలా వాటికి రీజనల్ లెవెల్లో కూడా రాష్ట్రాల్లో కూడా కాంగ్రెస్ ఉంది. కానీ కొన్నిసార్లు కాంగ్రెస్ లేకుండా వేరే పార్టీ అధికారంలోకి వచ్చినప్పుడు కాంగ్రెస్ సపోర్ట్ చేసేది. సో ఈ విధంగా కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ ముఖ్యంగా మన మొదటి 1970 అంటే నిజానికి 20 సంవత్సరాలు మొదటి 20 సంవత్సరాల వరకు కాంగ్రెస్ యొక్క మన ఫారిన్ పాలసీ విధానమే నిజానికి భారత ప్రభుత్వం అనుసరించాల్సి వచ్చింది. ఎందుకంటే అందులో లీడర్స్ కాంగ్రెస్ లీడరే. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ నెహ్రూ రూపొందించాడు, నెహ్రూ అమలు చేశాడు. నెహ్రూ రూపొందించాడు, నెహ్రూ అమలు చేశాడు. అయితే అమలు చేసిన తర్వాత చాలా మట్టుకి ఇందిరాగాంధీ కూడా అధికారంలోకి వచ్చిన తర్వాత నెహ్రూయిన్ ఫారెన్ పాలసీ నిజంగా అలానే మన కంటిన్యూ కొనసాగించింది అని చెప్పవచ్చు. సో కాంగ్రెస్ పోయిన తర్వాత ఫస్ట్ మనము అదే మన కాంగ్రెస్ ప్రభుత్వము మన ఒక ఫ్రంట్గా ఏర్పడి అంటే ముఖ్యంగా యూపీఏ యునైటెడ్ ప్రోగ్రెసివ్ అలయన్స్ అనే ఒక ఫ్రంట్ తయారు చేసి అందులో మన అధికారంలోకి ఓటింగ్ నిజానికి ఓట్లు డివైడ్ అయితేని తర్వాత యూనిటీ ఉంటుందని అపోజిషన్ పార్టీస్ ఇదే ఒక తమ సిద్ధాంతానికి వ్యతిరేకంగా పార్టీ అధికారంలోకి ఏ విధంగా మెదలాలి, ఏ విధంగా మనం మన వాదనల్లో గెలవాలని అది నిజానికి ఒక మన ఫ్రంట్ లెఫ్ట్ ఫ్రంట్ మన యునైటెడ్ ప్రోగ్రెసివ్ అలయన్స్ అనే ఒక ఫ్రంట్ను పొలిటికల్ ఫ్రంట్ను తయారు చేసినట్టు ఇది కాంగ్రెస్ పార్టీ. అదే ఇది కాంగ్రెస్ ఆధ్వర్యంలో ఉంటుంది. మన అదేవిధంగా నెక్స్ట్ ఏం జరిగిందంటే మన అంటే యూపీఏ టైంలో యూపీఏ అలయన్స్ అధికారంలో ఉన్నప్పుడు ఎటువంటి సిద్ధాంతాన్ని ఎటువంటి విదేశ విధానాన్ని మనగా ఆ ప్రభుత్వం ఎన్నుకుంటుందో మనం ఈ మన సిలబస్లో చర్చించవలసి ఉంటుంది అన్నట్టు. అదేవిధంగా మన కొంతకాలంలో అసలు దీనికంటే ముందు అంటే యూపీఏ రాకముందు ఇది మన మొత్తం ప్రపంచం అంతా రెండు భాగాలుగా ఏర్పడి మన ఒకటి మన సైనిక పరంగా తర్వాత ఇతర మిలిటరీ పరంగా దానికి మన పూర్తిగా మన హాస్టైల్ రిలేషన్స్ అంటే పగతో పట్టుదలతో మరియు వ్యతిరేకతతో ఒకదానికి వ్యతిరేకించడం ఆ పద్ధతిలో నిజానికి మన మన విదేశాంగ విధానం రూపొందించబడింది అన్నట్టు. అయితే కోల్డ్ వార్ మనము మన విదేశాంగ విధానాన్ని నిజానికి 3 ఫేజ్గా అది చేయొచ్చు. కోల్డ్ వార్ పీరియడ్, దాని తర్వాత మన యూపీఏ అధికారంలోని ఆ పీరియడ్, దాని తర్వాత మన ఎన్డీఏ అంటే మన బీజేపీ తర్వాత ఇతర పార్టీలతో ఏర్పడ్డ ప్రభుత్వం కింద ఏ విదేశాంగ విధానం రూపొందించబడి అమలు చేయబడిందో ఈ ముఖ్యంగా మనము విదేశాంగ విధానాన్ని చదవాల్సి ఉంటుంది. సో ఇంతటితో ఈ లెక్చర్ ముగించబడుతుంది. థ్యాంక్ యూ.
Good afternoon. নমস্কাৰ। আজি আমি BPYCৰ 132 ইউনিট 14ৰ চেপ্টাৰটো আলোচনা কৰিম প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম যি RM হেয়াৰৰ এইটো ডিছকাশ্যন আছিলে ৰিচাৰ্ড মাৰ্ভিয়ন হেয়াৰ 1919 পৰা 2002লৈকে তো এইটো ডিছকাছ কৰিছিলে। চ' ইয়াতে মেইনলি তাৰ অবজেক্টিভছ তাৰপিছত ইন্ট্ৰডাকশ্যন ডেফিনেশ্যন আৰু দ্য ছিগনিফিকেঞ্চ অফ দ্য প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম ইন মৰেল ফিলচফি যিটো নৈতিক দৰ্শনৰ মাজত অন্তৰ্ভুক্ত হৈ আছে এইখিনি আলোচনা কৰিম আৰু তাৰ যি দাৰ্শনিক যিটো ভিউজ এইখিনি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ দাৰ্শনিকসকলৰ মতে কিছুমান ভিউজ আছে এইখিনি আলোচনা কৰিম। চ' তাৰ অবজেক্টিভছৰ মেইনলি তাৰ অবজেক্টিভছ হ'ল টু এক্সপ্লেইন ইয়াতে ইয়াৰ্ছ মৰেল ইথিকেল পজিশ্যন এণ্ড মৰেলৰ যিটো হেয়াৰৰ যি প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ ওপৰতে তেওঁ আলোচনা কৰিছিলে। মেইন ইয়াতে ইউনিটৰ লক্ষ্য হ'ল কি মানে প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম মিনছ হোৱাট নিৰ্দেশনাবাদ মানে নিৰ্দেশনাৰ বিষয়ে তেওঁৰ যিটো নৈতিক আৰু অনৈতিক স্থিতিবোৰ আছিলে এইবোৰ ব্যাখ্যা কৰিছিলে আৰু লগতে কিছুমান নৈতিক আৰু অনৈতিক দৰ্শনত যিবিলাক নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ ভূমিকা আৰু বিশেষকৈ নৈতিক অনৈতিকতাৰ যি বিষয়ে মৌলিক প্ৰশ্নসমূহ আছিলে এই বিষয়ৰ ওপৰতো তেওঁ ব্যাখ্যা আগবঢ়াইছিলে আৰু তাৰ লগত কিছুমান ক্ৰিটিচিজমো দিয়া হৈছে যে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ বেলেগ ফিলচফাৰসকলে ইয়াৰ নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ ওপৰতে আলোচনা পইণ্টছ দিছিলে। চ' এইটোতে উদ্দেশ্য পাতনি সংজ্ঞা আৰু নৈতিক দৰ্শনত নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ তাৎপৰ্য আৰু দাৰ্শনিক যিটো দৃষ্টিভংগী এইখিনি আলোচনা কৰা হৈছে। তেনেহ'লে আমি ফাৰ্ষ্টতে তাৰ ইন্ট্ৰডাকশ্যনৰ ভূমিকাখিনি কি আছে আলোচনা কৰোঁ। মেইনলি দাৰ্শনিকসকলৰ ফাৰ্ষ্টতে চক্ৰেটিছ এৰিষ্টটল তেওঁলোকে আছিলে হিউম কাণ্ট মিল এইসকল দাৰ্শনিক আছিলে আগতে যিবিলাক যেতিয়া নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ বীজো বিচাৰি উলিয়াব পৰা নাই তেতিয়া তেওঁলোকে দাৰ্শনিক আছিলে। কিন্তু এই মেটানৈতিক যিটো নৈতিকতাৰ তত্ত্বৰ ওপৰতে কিছুমান কেইজনমান সমৰ্থক আছিলে যিসকলে নৈতিকতাটো লৈ অলপ বেছিকৈ আলোচনা কৰিছিলে। তাৰে মাজত হ'ল এজন দাৰ্শনিক ৰিচাৰ্ড মাৰ্ভিনেহাৰে হেয়াৰ তেওঁৰ ফুল নেম এনেই আমি হেয়াৰ বুলিহে শ্বৰ্টলি ক'ব পাৰোঁ। চ' নৈতিক বক্তৃতাৰ বিষয়ে জৰিয়তে যিবিলাক উপযোগিতাবাদৰ পচন্দক নিশ্চয়তা প্ৰদান কৰিছিলে হেয়াৰে। তাৰপিছত এইটো এনালাইচিছৰ মৰেল যি নৈতিকতাৰ যি ডিছকাছ আছে এইটোৰ এনালাইচিছৰ জৰিয়তে ইয়াৰে কিছুমান জাষ্টিফাইড ইউটিলিটেৰিয়ানিজমৰ ওপৰতে কিছুমান জাষ্টিফাই কৰিছিলে যিটো ইউটিলিটেৰিয়ানিজম উদাৰতাবাদ আমি আগতেও আলোচনা কৰিছিলোঁ বহুত কেইবাৰমান ইউটিলিটেৰিয়ানিজমৰ বিষয়তে। চ' তেওঁ এইটো মেইনলি যিবিলাক ৰয়েল আৰ্টিলাৰী ছেকেণ্ড ৱৰ্ল্ড ৱাৰৰ সময়ত যিবোৰ মুখ্য কিছুমান প্ৰব্লেম হৈছিলে এইবিলাকৰ লগত তেওঁ হেয়াৰে কিছুমান মৰেল যিবোৰ ডিছকাছ হৈছিলে এইখিনিও আলোচনা কৰিছিলে যে কি প্ৰব্লেমৰ লগত এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চ ছেকেণ্ড ৱৰ্ল্ড ৱাৰৰ সময়ত যিবিলাক এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চ হৈছিলে হেয়াৰৰ মতে যি লাইফ আৰু দাৰ্শনিক যিটো অৱস্থা হৈছিলে এইখিনিৰ মাজতে তেওঁ কিছুমান নৈতিক যিটো দাৰ্শন এইটোৰ লগতে মিলাই তাৰপিছত নেচাৰৰ যিটো পজিশ্যন হৈছিলে এইখিনিৰ লগত মিলাই তেওঁ অলপ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমটো ডিছকাছ কৰিছিলে যি নিৰ্দেশনাবাদ যে এনেকুৱা হ'ব নোৱাৰে বা তেনেকুৱা এইবোৰ বস্তু তেওঁ দেখুৱাই দিছিলে। তো মেইনলি তেওঁ এইটোৰ মতে ইন আনচাৰিং মৰেল কুৱেশ্যন এইটো এটা আছিলে ৰেচনেল এক্টিভিটিৰ ওপৰত যিটো মৰেল ফিলচফিৰ ওপৰত যি আনচাৰিং কৰাটো আছিলে এইটোও এটা এজ এন ইমিটিভিষ্ট বা ছাবজেক্টিভিষ্ট তেওঁহে এইটোৰ মেনশ্যন কৰি দিছিলে তেতিয়া। চ' হেয়াৰ ইজ দেয়াৰ ইজ এনাডাৰ ছেট অফ ফিলচফাৰ্ছ who emphasize on the nationality. কিছুমান ইয়াৰ বাহিৰতো আৰু কিছুমান বহুত কেইগৰাকী ফিলচফাৰ আহিছিলে যিসকলে এইটোৰ ওপৰতে rationality বা therefore to understand the moral question, problems of issues and required ৰেচনেলিটিৰ ওপৰত যি ভিত্তি কৰিছিলে এইটোৰ ওপৰতেও তেওঁ অলপ বিশ্লেষণ কৰিছিলে, তেওঁৰ বক্তৃতাখিনি বিশ্লেষণ কৰিছিলে। চ' নৈতিক দৰ্শনত যি দাৰ্শনিকসকলে নৈতিক সমস্যা বা আৰু নৈতিক বিচাৰৰ বিষয়ে নৈতিক মতামত চিন্তা দিয়ে আৰু এইদৰে প্ৰত্যেকৰে নিজৰ যিটো মতামত দিয়াৰ স্বাধীনতা থাকে এইটো আছিলে। কিন্তু হৰৰ মতে কি আছিলে, এই চিন্তাধাৰাৰ যিটো সমস্যাটো আছিলে এইটো হ'ল এটা আনৰ প্ৰতি চিন্তাৰ অভাৱ আৰু নৈতিক প্ৰণয়ন কৰাৰ সময়তো যুক্তিবাদী চিন্তাক ব্যৱহাৰ কৰা নহয় বিচাৰবোৰ। সেয়েহে পূৰ্বতে উল্লেখ কৰা হৈছে দাৰ্শনিকসকলৰ বিষয়বস্তুবাদী বা আৱেগতাবাদী, কিন্তু হাৰে কয় যে যুক্তিবাদৰ ওপৰত গুৰুত্ব দিয়াই আন এটা দাৰ্শনিকৰ গোট আছে আৰু এটা বিষয়বস্তু আছিলে। কাৰ মতে আছিলে? হেৰৰ মতে। তেওঁ কৈছিলে যে যুক্তিবাদৰ ওপৰতে গুৰুত্ব দিয়াটো হ'ল এটা কি আন এটা গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ গোট আছে। তেওঁ মানে এইটোৰ ওপৰতে গুৰুত্ব দিছিলে যে কাৰ মতে? হাৰৰ মতে। তেওঁ মেইনলি ইয়াতে যে কিছুমান বস্তু উল্লেখ কৰা আগতে দাৰ্শনিকসকলৰ যি বিষয়বস্তুবাদী বা আৱেগতাবাদী এইসকলৰ ওপৰতে তেওঁৰ এগ্ৰী আছিলে, কিন্তু হাৰে কৈছিলে যে যুক্তিবাদৰ ওপৰত বিস্তৃত কৰি অন্যায় যিটো হয় এইটো কৰি এজন তেওঁৰ এই যি যুক্তিবাদৰ ওপৰত বেলেগে যিবিলাক গুৰুত্ব দিছিলে তেওঁলোককো এটা ভিউ ৰাখিছিলে যে আমাৰ এটা গোট আছে এবং গোটসকলৰ লগত মিলি পেলাই আমি এইটো ডিচিশ্যনটো একচেপ্ট কৰিব পাৰিম। ইয়াতে প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ মতে কি আছিলে, যুক্তিৰ যিটো আৱেগতাবাদী আছিলে, কিন্তু হাৰে কয় যে যুক্তিবাদৰ ওপৰতে গুৰুত্ব দিয়া হ'ল আন এটা দাৰ্শনিক গোট আছে। ইন প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম দেয়াৰ আৰ চাম ক'ৰ প্ৰিন্সিপল আছিলে। পইণ্টবিলাক মই কৈ দিওঁ, যেনেকা মৰেল ইজ জাজমেণ্টেল এণ্ড প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যন আৰু যিটো প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনছৰ আৰু আণ্ডাৰ ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজডো আছে, লগত ছেগমেণ্টেশ্যন অফ এইটো ইজ আৰু এটৰ মানে যিটো ছেগমেণ্টেশ্যন এইটোৰ মানে কাৰণটো কি দুটা হৈ আছে। তাৰপিছতো হ'ল ছেপাৰেশ্যন অফ ইজ এণ্ড অট ফ্ৰম ছেপাৰেশ্যন অফ ইজ মানে বৰ্তমান এণ্ড অট যিটো হ'বই লাগিব এইখিনি ছেপাৰেশ্যন কৰিব দিয়া হৈছে। তাৰপিছত টু লেভেলছ অফ মৰেল থিংকিং, যেটা দুটা লেভেল হ'ব মৰেল থিংকিংছৰ এইখিনি দিয়া হ'ল। তাৰপিছতো হ'ল কি ইনফ্লুয়েন্স এণ্ড কনফ্লিক্ট, থাৰ্ডলি হ'ল ইনফ্লুয়েন্স এণ্ড কনফ্লিক্ট। যেতিয়া আমি কিবা কওঁ যে এক্স ইজ ৰাইট, দেট মিনছ হোৱাট? এক্স ইজ টু বি কমেন্স, মানে কিবা এটা ৰং বুলি আমি কোৱাৰ লগে লগে এইটোক আমি কি কৰিব লাগিব? ক'ব লাগিব যে দিছ ইজ ৰং, দেট মিনছ হোৱাট? দিছ, এইটো আমি কৰিব নোৱাৰোঁ ডাইৰেক্টলি, তেনেকুৱা কৰিব লাগে। যেতিয়া ইয়াৰে ইলুষ্ট্ৰেট কৰিছিলে যে প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ ওপৰত তেওঁৰ ৰাইটিংছখিনি লেংগুৱেজ অফ মৰেল নামৰ এটা আৰ্টিকুলত তেওঁ লিখিছিলে যে মৰেল থিংকিঙৰ বিষয়ে লিখাই গৈ দেট ফ্ৰীডম এণ্ড ৰিজন, যিটো ফ্ৰীডম আৰু ৰিজন এইটো ইয়াৰে ক্লেইমছ কৰাৰ মতে হ'ল কি মৰেল টাৰ্ম অফ প্ৰেডিকেট চাচ এজ গুড বেড, যেনেকা ভাল বেয়া শুদ্ধ অশুদ্ধ এইবোৰ আছে, তেনেকা এটা মৰেল টাৰ্মৰ যিটো প্ৰেডিকেট হয় এইটোৰ লগত মৰেল টাৰ্মৰ প্ৰেডিকেট বুলি কওঁতে আমি কি বুজি পাওঁ, যেনেকা গুড বেড ৰাইট ৰং এটচেট্ৰা এইবোৰ চ' এইবোৰৰ লগতে কিছুমান বস্তু যেনেকৈ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপ্টিভলি বা ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজেবিলিটি দুটাৰ ওপৰতে বেছ কৰি এইখিনি আমি দুটা প্ৰিন্সিপলৰ ওপৰতে ভিত্তি কৰি তাৰ ভাল বেয়া এইখিনি আমি ওলাব পাৰোঁ চ' হৰে এই দুটা বিপৰীত চিন্তাক অতি গুৰুত্ব সহকাৰে লৈ নৈতিক প্ৰশ্নৰ যিটো নতুন দিশ আছিলে আৰু সমাধান দিবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিছিলে এই দুটা সমস্যাৰ সৈতে মোকাবিলা কৰি ফলস্বৰূপে তেওঁ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপ্টিভিজমৰ নামত এটা বিকল্প নৈতিক তত্ত্ব গঢ়ি তুলিছিলে যিটো 1965 চ' হাৰেৰ মতে কি আছিলে নৈতিক বিচাৰবোৰ বৰ্ণনাত্মক অৰ্থ বা উপাদানৰ পৰিৱৰ্তেও ইয়াক নীতিগত আৰু নিৰ্দেশনামূলক অৰ্থ বা উপাদানৰ দ্বাৰাহে বুজিব লাগে চ' তেওঁৰ বিপৰীতমুখী যিটো চিন্তা আছিলে দুটাই গুৰুত্ব সহকাৰে সমাধান দিবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিছিলে কিন্তু প্ৰেছক্ৰিপ্টিভিজম এইটো নামটো এটা বেলেগ এটা নৈতিক তত্ত্ব গঢ়ি উঠিছিলে যদিও তাৰ মাজত নৈতিক বিচাৰবোৰৰ যিটো বৰ্ণনাত্মক অৰ্থ বা উপাদান আছিলে সেইখিনিৰ মৰেলি নীতিগতভাৱে আৰু নিৰ্দেশনামূলক অৰ্থ মানে হ'ল প্ৰেছক্ৰিপ্টিভিজমৰ মতে যিটো মিনিং এইখিনিতে আমি বুজিব লাগিব মেইনলি এইটো বেলেগবিলাকত পইণ্ট নোহোৱাকৈ এই দুটাৰ থ্ৰুতে আমি বুজিব লাগিব চ' যদি কোনো ইফ এনি চেণ্টেন্স এইটো মৰেল টাৰ্ম যদি ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজড হয় বা প্ৰেছক্ৰাইবড হয় তেতিয়াহ'লে কি হ'ব এইটো মৰেল জাজমেণ্টৰ তেনেকুৱা হ'লেই যে এইটো মৰেল জাজমেণ্ট হৈ যাব তেনেকুৱা নহয় আমি মৰেল জাজমেণ্টত যোৱাৰ পিছত অট'মেটিকেলি এইটো নৈতিকতাৰ ওপৰত ভাল বেয়া এইটো গুণ আহি যাব চ' উই কেন পুট দিছ ইন মৰেল একশ্যন আমি আমাৰ নৈতিক একশ্যনত গৈও এইটো বিচাৰ কৰিব পাৰোঁ দেন আমাৰ মৰেল জাজমেণ্ট যোনটো এইটোও আকৌ পটেঞ্চিয়েল হৈ যাব পাৰে বা ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজ হৈ যাব পাৰে চ' এইখিনি বস্তুৰ ওপৰতে ইয়াৰে তৰ্ক কৰিছিলে যে আমি যদি কনচেপ্ট অফ ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটি আৰু প্ৰেছক্ৰিপ্টিভিলিটি দুটাই সমানে গুড প্ৰিফাৰেঞ্চ দি ইউটিলিটেৰিয়ানিজমত ইনক্লুড কৰি দিওঁ তেনেহ'লে ইউটিলিটেৰিজমতো ব্যাখ্যা কৰিব ডেট দ্য কনচিকুৱেঞ্চেছ অফ আৱাৰ একশ্যন শুড বি মেক্সিমাইজেশ্যন অফ আমাৰ ছেটিছফেকশ্যনৰ ওপৰত আহি যাব তেতিয়া or satisfaction of people's preferences. So, in freedom and reason, he took two positions. এইটো এটা কি হ'ব দুটা পজিশন হৈ যাব So, here argues that if we are doing the concept of universality and prescriptibility, that means what? These points will be discussed below in definition to discuss কৰা হৈছে in the book chapter 6 already আমি এইটো outline কৰা হৈছিলে যে basic যিটো পজিশন হয় এইখিনি উইথ ৰেফাৰেন্সৰ লগত আলোচনা কৰা হৈছে so he argued about the discipline আৰু ইউটিলিটাৰিজমৰ আৰ্গুমেণ্টৰ ওপৰত বা কভাৰ্ডৰ ওপৰতেও এইটো দুটা পাৰ্টিজ ইনভলভ হৈ আছে এইখিনি যথেষ্ট এটা ইম্পৰ্টেঞ্চ আছে চ' হেৰাৰ মতে কিছুমান ডেফিনিশ্যন তেওঁ দিছিলে তেওঁৰ ডেফিনিশ্যন মতে আৰ এম হাৰে তেওঁৰ ভাল নেম হ'ল আৰ এম হাৰে চ' আৰ এম হাৰেৰ মানে তেওঁৰ লিখা মতে এইটো হ'ল কি মৰেল থিংকিং ফ্ৰীডমছ এণ্ড ৰিজন এই তিনিটাতে প্ৰেছক্ৰিপ্টিভিজমৰ চিত্ৰণ বা বিকাশ কৰিছিলে চ' হৰে দাবী কৰে যে এইটো এটা নৈতিকতা বিচাৰ সাৰ্বজনীন আৰু নিৰ্দেশনাত্মক প্ৰকৃতি আৰু আন এটা হৈছে ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটি হয় এইটো প্ৰেছক্ৰিপ্টিভিজম এণ্ড ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটি এইটোৰ এটা নৈতিকতাৰ যিটো বিচাৰ সাৰ্বজনীন হয় বা নিৰ্দেশনামূলক প্ৰকৃতিৰ হয় এই দুটাৰ ওপৰতে এই দুটা ডিপেণ্ডেণ্ট আছিলে চ' যদি কোনো বাক্যৰ নৈতিক শব্দ আছে যিটো সাৰ্বজনীন আৰু নিৰ্ধাৰিত কৰিব নোৱাৰোঁ, তেন্তে তাৰ অৰ্থ হ'ল ইয়াক নৈতিকতা হিচাপে ব্যৱহাৰ কৰিব নোৱাৰি বিচাৰে। চ' কিছুমান বস্তু তেনেকা আমি নৈতিকতাৰ হিচাপত গ'লে আমি এইটো ব্যৱহাৰ কৰিব নোৱাৰোঁ, যি সাৰ্বজনীন বা নিৰ্ধাৰিত কৰিব নোৱাৰে। চ' কিছুমান ক্ষেত্ৰত এইটো আমি কৰিলে এইটো ইয়াতে সাৰ্বজনীনতা বিচাৰ ভাৱটা এইটো নাথাকিব। চ' ইয়াতে থিংকিঙৰ মতেও এনেকুৱা আছিলে। চ' নিৰ্দেশনাবাদে দাবী কৰে, আকৌ তাৰ সংজ্ঞাৰ মাজত কি আছে, নিৰ্দেশনাবাদে দাবী কৰে যে নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ অৰ্থৰ এক উপাদান থাকে যিয়ে হ'ল কি নৈতিক বক্তব্যত নিৰ্দেশনামূলক প্ৰকৃতিৰ কৰি তোলে। অৰ্থাৎ এই যিটো প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম হৈছে এনে এটা থিচিছ যিয়ে আমাক কয় নৈতিক যেতিয়া নৈতিক এইটো শব্দবোৰ হয়, এই শব্দবোৰৰ সৈতে নৈতিক কৰি তুলিবলৈ ব্যৱহাৰ কৰা হৈছিল। চ' অকলে যে মানে এই নৈতিকতাৰ বিৰুদ্ধে নৈতিকতাৰ ফেভাৰতে তেওঁলোকে এইখিনি কৰিছে এইটোৱেই নহয়, তেওঁ এইটো নৈতিকতাৰ যিবিলাক কাম নৈতিকতাৰ ওপৰতে বা প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমত তৈয়াৰ কৰিছিলে, এইখিনিৰ ওপৰতেও সিহঁতে নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ দুটা উপাদান থাকে আৰু এটা বৰ্ণাত্মক বা দ্বিতীয়টো হ'ল এজনে মানে বৰ্ণনা কৰিব পাৰে আৰু এজনে এইটো নিৰ্দেশনামূলকভাৱে ল'ব পাৰে। চ' প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ মানে হ'ল কাৰোবাক কিবা এটা কৰিবলৈ কোৱা। চ' এইখিনি প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ ক্লেইমছ আৰু মৰেলছ এইটো আছিলে। চ' ইউনিভাৰ্চেল প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনছ যিটো হয় টেলছ আছ এ ফৰ্ম এণ্ড অবজেক্টিভ, সেইটো হয় এক্সপেক্টেবল ইউনিভাৰ্চেল প্ৰিন্সিপলছ। চ' ইউনিভাৰ্চেল প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যন টেলছ আছ হাউ টু পাৰফৰ্ম দেয়াৰ একশ্যনছ। চ' এইটো হ'ল কি এটা নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ লগত প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ মানেও কাৰোবাক এটা কৰিবলৈ দিয়া এইটো। চ' যিবোৰ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যন ইউনিভাৰ্চেল নীতিৰ ওপৰতে নিৰ্ভৰশীল, সেইবোৰকেও ইউনিভাৰ্চেল প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যন বোলা হয়। চ' সাৰ্বজনীন প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনে কাৰোবাক কেৱল কিবা এটা কৰিবলৈ কোৱাই নহয়, ই কিবা এটা কৰিবলৈ পৰামৰ্শও দিয়ে আৰু আমি পৰামৰ্শ দি কাৰণৰ অস্তিত্বৰ ইংগিত দিব পাৰোঁ। চ' এই কাৰণবোৰ প্ৰকাশযোগ্য সাৰ্বজনীন নীতি, সাৰ্বজনীন প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনে কোনো কাৰ্য কৰিবলৈ কয় আৰু কাৰণ ই যে কিছুমান বৈশিষ্ট্যতাৰে গঠিত, গতিকে সেই কাৰ্য নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰা সেই বৈশিষ্ট্য থকা সকলো ক্ৰিয়া নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰা হয়। চ' প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনিজমত ইউনিভাৰ্চেল নীতিৰ ওপৰতেও মেক্সিমাম নিৰ্ভৰশীল হৈ আছে, যিটো প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনিজমত কোৱা হৈছে। চ' সাৰ্বজনীন প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনেও কাৰোবাক কেৱল কিবা এটা কৰিবলৈ কোৱাই নহয়, ই কিবা এটা কৰিবলৈ পৰামৰ্শও দিয়ে। চ' আমি যদি পৰামৰ্শ দি এইটোৰ যিটো কজ হ'ব এইটোৰ লগতে আকৌ অস্তিত্বৰ ইংগিত দিব পাৰোঁ, তেনেহ'লে এই কাৰণবোৰ কি হ'ব প্ৰকাশযোগ্য হৈ থাকিব সাৰ্বজনীন নীতিৰ মাজত। চ' সাৰ্বজনীন প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনে কোনো কাৰ্য কৰিবলৈ কয় যে কাৰণ ই কিছুমান বৈশিষ্ট্যৰে গঠিত। চ' গতিকে সেই কাৰ্যধাৰণ নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰাতে সেই বিশিষ্ট থকা সকলো ক্ৰিয়া নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰা হয়, যিবোৰ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনৰ এইটোৰ লগত। চ' ইয়াৰ্ছৰ ভাৰ্চন যিটো প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমত, এইটোত মেইনলি মৰেল জাজমেণ্টছ প্ৰেছক্ৰাইব ৰেডাৰ দেন দ্য মেয়াৰলি ডিছক্ৰাইব। এইটো তেওঁ প্ৰেছক্ৰাইব কৰিছিলে, নিৰ্দেশনা দিছিলে, মেয়াৰলি ডিছক্ৰাইবতকৈ বেছিকৈ সি ফাৰ্দাৰ তেওঁ আৰ্গু কৰিছিলে যে মৰেল প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনছ ডিফাৰ ফ্ৰম নন মৰেল ওৱান। অট'মেটিকেলি তেওঁ আৰ্গু কৰিছিলে এইটো মৰেলৰ লগত নন মৰেলৰ যিটো ডিফাৰেঞ্চ আছে সেইটো থাকিবই। চ' হিয়াৰ থিংছ ডেট প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম ইজ বেষ্ট কেপচাৰ্ড অন দ্য বেচিছ অফ এ ৰেচনেল জাষ্টিফিকেশ্যন অফ মৰেল ক্লেইমছ। কিছুমান কি আছে মৰেল জাষ্টিফিকেশ্যনৰ কাৰণে এটা দুটা এফালে সেইফালে কিবা হৈ যাব পাৰে তেনেকুৱা হৈছে এইটো থাকি গ'ল চ' ইউটিলিটাৰিজমৰ ক্ষেত্ৰতো indeed he argue কৰিছিলে that the only rational moral view is a kind of utilitarianism only যিটো rational view এইটো এটা kind of utilitarianism thus he brought together two major thoughts of moral theory that is the Kantian tradition and his Kantian tradition কাণ্টিয়ানৰ মতে যিটো গুণ আছিলে প্ৰাইমাৰী কোৱালিটি ছেকেণ্ডাৰী কোৱালিটিজ এইবিলাকৰ মাজত যেনেকুৱা বেলেগ বেলেগ মানুহ ভেদে বেলেগ বেলেগ এটা বস্তু যদি ৱেইট চাবলৈ যাওঁ আমি লেন্থ চাবলৈ যাওঁ এইটো মানুহৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত এইটো চেঞ্জ নহয় এইটো যেনেকুৱা ছাপ'জ যিবোৰ কোৱালিটিজৰ মাজত যিবোৰ চেঞ্জ নহয় এইটো সকলোৰ লগতে ছেইম বুলি থাকিব বাট যিটো ছাপ'জ টেষ্ট তাৰপিছত যেনেকুৱা এই যিবোৰ ভাল নে বেয়া এইবোৰ বস্তু ক'বলৈ গ'লে কি হ'ব লাগিব আমি এজন যি পৰামৰ্শটো দিব পাৰে তেনেকুৱা এজন ব্যক্তি থাকিব কিন্তু সাৰ্বজনীন প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনে আকৌ কোনো কাৰ্য কৰিবলৈও কয় কাৰণ ই কিছুমান বৈশিষ্ট্যৰে গঠিত আৰু গতিকে যি সেই কাৰ্যৰ কিছুমান যি সাৰ্বজনীন প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যনেও কোনো কাৰ্য কৰিবলৈ কয় কাৰণ ই এটা কাৰণৰ ই কিছুমান কৰিবলৈ কয় কাৰণেই হ'ল কি কিছুমান বৈশিষ্ট্যৰে গঠিত আৰু গতিকে সেই কাৰ্য নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰাটো সেই বৈশিষ্ট্য থকা প্ৰয়োজনটো সক্ৰিয় আৰম্ভ কৰি দিয়ে চ' কোনো কাৰ্য কৰিবলৈ কয় যে কাৰণ ই কিছুমান বৈশিষ্ট্যৰে গঠিত আকৌ গতিকে সেই কাৰ্য নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰাত সেই বৈশিষ্ট্য থকা সকলো ক্ৰিয়া নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰা হয় নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ যি বৰ্ণনাত্মক যি উপাদান সংস্কৃতিভেদে সেইটো আকৌ ভিন্ন হয় এই উপাদানটো ব্যক্তি সময় স্থান নিৰ্দিষ্ট এইবোৰ হ'ল কি ভিন্ন কিন্তু প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ মতে নিৰ্দেশনামূলক উপাদানত নিৰন্তৰ প্ৰকৃতিৰ সেইবাবেই নিৰ্দেশনাবাদে নৈতিক মতানৈক্য আৰু নৈতিকতাৰ ভিত্তি গঢ়ি বিচাৰ কৰিব পাৰে চ' ডেট মিনছ হোৱাট কিছুমান বস্তু যদি আমি তেনেকুৱা ওলাই কিনি যিটো তাৰ মেইন ভাৰ্চন হয় নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ লগত যি বৰ্ণনাত্মক উপাদান বা সংস্কৃতিভেদে বা ব্যক্তিভেদে যিবোৰ ভিন্ন হয় এই উপাদানটো ব্যক্তি সময় স্থান নিৰ্দিষ্ট এইবিলাকৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত কি হয় অট'মেটিকেলি অলপ চেঞ্জ হয় কিন্তু ইয়াতে চেঞ্জ হ'লেও ইয়াতে অলপ বেছিকৈ চেঞ্জ আনহাতে নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ নিৰ্দেশনামূলক উপাদান নিৰন্তৰ প্ৰকৃতিৰ সেইবাবেই নিৰ্দেশনামূলক নৈতিক উচ্চ এইটো ঠিক আছে দেন এতিয়া ডেফিনেশ্যনবিলাকত চাওঁ ethical the meta-ethical theory of that moral statements are commands or prescriptions such as rather than the simple statements of fact এইটো হ'ল এটা নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ নৈতিক অনৈতিকৰ ভিত্তিৰ ওপৰতে তুলে বিচাৰ কিছুমান মৰেল ষ্টেটমেণ্টছ আছে যিবোৰ ছাপ'জ ডোণ্ট ষ্টিল আমি কোনোবাক ক'লোঁ কি ডোণ্ট ষ্টিল হুইচ ইজ এ হোৱাট ক'ব পাৰিমনে নোৱাৰোঁ চ' এক্সাম্পল এইটো মৰেল ষ্টেটমেণ্টছৰ লাইক ডোণ্ট ষ্টিল ইজ এ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যন ডেট দ্য দে শুড নট ডু এইটো মানে কি ডোণ্ট ষ্টিল এইটোৰ মেইন হোৱাট দে শুড নট ডু ইট মই এজনক এইটো এইটো ডেট মিনছ হোৱাট নৈতিকটো যিটো যদিও নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ বৰ্ণনাত্মক উপাদানবিলাক সংস্কৃতিভেদে বা ব্যক্তিভেদে ভিন্ন হয় কিন্তু উপাদানটো ব্যক্তি সময় স্থান নিৰ্দিষ্ট চ' আনহাতে এইখিনিও প্ৰকৃতিৰ হয়, নিৰন্তৰ প্ৰকৃতি। সেইবাবেই নিৰ্দেশনাবোধে নৈতিক প্ৰকৃতিৰ মতানৈক্য আৰু নৈতিকতাৰ বৃদ্ধি গঢ়ি তুলিব টেলিভিছন। চ' হাড়েৰ বিধানবাদৰ সংস্কৰণৰ কোৱা হৈছিলে যে নৈতিক বিচাৰেই কেৱল অনুভৱৰ বিচাৰ বা প্ৰকাশ কৰাতকৈ নিৰ্ধাৰিত কৰে। চ' যি হাড়ৰ মতে কি বিধানবাদৰ যি সংস্কৰণত কোৱা হৈছিলে যে নৈতিক বিচাৰেই হ'ল কেৱল অনুভৱৰ বৰ্ণনা আৰু যি বৰ্ণনা বা প্ৰকাশ কৰাতকৈ নিৰ্ধাৰিত কৰে। চ' তেওঁ আৰু যুক্তি আগবঢ়ায় যে নৈতিক বিধানসমূহ নৈতিকতাৰ অনৈতিক বিধানৰ পৰা পূৰ্বৰ দিনৰে পৃথক বৈশিষ্ট্য ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজেবিলিটি যিটো এইটো কোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিবেচনা কৰে। আকৌ তেওঁ প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি সাজু হ'ব পাৰে। চ' নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰলৈ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব লাগে। বাট ধাৰণাটো ইউভেলেটাম তাৰপিছত ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজেবিলিটি ডিছকাউণ্টৰ দ্বাৰা প্ৰভাৱিত কৰাব লাগিব। চ' ডেট মিনছ হোৱাট হাড়েৰ বিধানবাদৰ সংস্কৰণতো এইটো নৈতিক বিচাৰৰেই কেৱল অনুভৱৰ বৰ্ণনা দিয়া হৈছে আৰু এইটোও নিৰ্ধাৰিত কৰে। হেয়াৰে থিংছ মানে কৰিছিলে যে প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম ইজ বেষ্ট তেওঁ মানে বহুত ভুল কৰিছিলে আৰু এইটো ফিলিংছটো লৈ যে তেওঁ এক্সপ্ৰেছ ফিলিংছত he further argues that moral prescriptions universalizability and who judges and universalizability means those are related to the universal. So ইয়াতে ফিলচফাৰ দাৰ্শনিক যদিও হাড় দাৰ্শনিক থাকিলেও তেওঁ অলপ লোকেল ফিলচফি দাৰ্শনিকতা লৈও আলোচনা কৰিছিলে। চ' হাড়ৰ যিটো পূৰ্বৰ যিদৰে পৃথক বৈশিষ্ট্য বা যুক্তি দ্বাৰাই যোনটো হয় ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজেবিলিটিৰ যিয়ে কোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিবেচনা কৰে। তেওঁ প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে যিটো নৈতিক ভাল হৈছিলে এইটো পূৰ্বৰটোৰ দৰে যিদৰে পৃথক বৈশিষ্ট্য যুক্তি দ্বাৰা এইখিনিতে প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যোগানক কামক নৈতিকতাৰ লগতে প্ৰাসংগিকতাৰ বাবে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব লাগিব। চ' ধাৰণাটোৰ ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজেবিলিটিৰ কাণ্টৰ দ্বাৰা প্ৰভাৱিত হ'ব পাৰে। অকলে যে হাড়ৰ জৰিয়তে ফিলচফাৰ হেয়াৰৰ জৰিয়তে নহয়, এইটো কাণ্টৰ পৰা কিছুমান ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজেবিলিটি কাণ্টৰ পৰা প্ৰকাশিত হ'ব পাৰে। চ' ইয়াতে অনুৰূপভাৱে হাড়ে ভাবে যে নৈতিক আপেক্ষিকতাবাদৰ এৰাই চলি আৰু নৈতিক দাবীৰ যুক্তিসংগত ন্যায্যতা প্ৰদানৰ ভিত্তি নৈতিক যিটো বিচাৰ হয় এইটোৰ বিচাৰ বিবেচনাই কাৰ্যক পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন কৰা ধৰণেৰে নিৰ্দেশনাবাদক সৰ্বোত্তম বা পাৰে। চ' এইটো একমাত্ৰ যুক্তিবাদী নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী হ'ল এক প্ৰকাৰৰ উপযোগিতাবাদ। এইদৰে তেওঁ নৈতিক তথ্যৰ দুটা প্ৰধান চিন্তা আৰু কাণ্টিয়ান পৰম্পৰা তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটোৰ পৰা পেলাইছিলে, একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে দুটাই ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজেবিলিটি আৰু উপযোগিতাবাদ কৰিছিলে। চ' সৰ্বোত্তমভাৱে ধৰা পৰে। তো সঁচাকৈয়ে তেওঁ যুক্তি দিছিলে যে একমাত্ৰ যুক্তিবাদী যিটো নৈতিক যিবোৰ আদৰ্শ হ'ব এইবোৰৰ লগতে কি থাকিব লাগিব অলপ যুক্তিপূৰ্ণ যেনেকা আমি যদি কিবা এটা যে লাইট মাজত যদি আমি এটা পোহৰ দিবলৈ কিবা এটা এক্সট্ৰা আজিকালি পোৱা যায় লগাবলৈ then we will get what more focus বেছিকে আৰু যুক্তিবাদী কিন্তু এইখিনি কৰিব গ'লে অলপ যেনেকা কথা পাতিব লাগে বা সঁচাকৈহে তেওঁৰ এইবিলাক যুক্তি দিছিল যে এইটো অলপ ডিবেট টাইপ তৰ্ক কৰিব লাগে চ' এইদৰে তেওঁ নৈতিক তত্ত্বৰ দুটা প্ৰধান অৰ্থাৎ এইদৰে নিজেৰে নৈতিক তথ্যৰ দুটা প্ৰধান প্ৰমাণিত হ'ব চ' এইদৰে তেওঁ নৈতিকভাৱে তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটোৰে ধৰা পেলাইছিলে একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে আৰু ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটিৰ আৰু উপযোগিতাবাদৰ চ' হাৰে ভাবে যে নৈতিক আপেক্ষিকতাবাদৰ এৰাই চলি আৰু নৈতিক দাবীৰ যুক্তিসংগত নিশ্চয়তা প্ৰদানৰ ভিত্তি প্ৰদান কৰি নৈতিক যিবোৰ বিচাৰ বিবেচনায় বা কাৰ্যক পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন কৰা ধৰণেৰে নিৰ্দেশনাতাবাদক সৰ্বোত্তমভাৱে ধৰা পৰে চ' সঁচাকৈয়ে তেওঁ যুক্তি দিছিলে যে একমাত্ৰ নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী হ'ল এক প্ৰকাৰৰ উপযোগিতাবাদ একমাত্ৰ আৰু এইদৰে কয় যে নৈতিক তত্ত্ব দুটা প্ৰধান চিন্তা বা কাণ্টিয়ান পৰম্পৰা যিটো কাণ্টিয়ান means of the according to Kant there are some quality চিন্তা and কিছুমান পৰম্পৰাও আছিলে যিবোৰ তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটোতে ধৰা পেলাইছিলে চ' একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে দুটা ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটি এণ্ড কাণ্টিয়ানৰ পৰম্পৰা তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটো ধৰা পেলাইছিলে চ' কাণ্টিয়ানৰ পৰম্পৰাৰ তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটোৰো ধৰা পেলাইছিলে আৰু একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে যে ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটিৰ আৰু উপযোগিতাবাদে চ' হাৰৰ কোৱা মতে তেওঁৰ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম ইজ ভেৰি ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট আছিলে এণ্ড ইট হেল্প টু দ্য পিপুল to understand help to the people to understand what moral judgments from universal and moral proposition from universal judgment so here thinks that the prescriptivism is very important and he helped to the people to understand এইদৰে তেওঁ নৈতিক তত্ত্বৰ দুটা প্ৰধান চিন্তা আৰু কাণ্টিয়ান পৰম্পৰা তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটোৰ পৰা ধৰা পেলাইছিলে চ' একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে যে ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটি আৰু ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটিৰ যিটো উপযোগিতাবাদ আছে এই দুটাৰ লগতে কি আছিলে তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটোৰ একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে আৰু ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটিৰ লেভেলৰ যিবিলাক আছিলে এইটো তেওঁৰ পৰা এই বস্তুখিনি উদাৰবাদৰ পৰা বস্তুখিনি আজি একমাত্ৰ যুক্তিবাদীৰ নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী আছিলে এইটোৰ উপযোগিতাবাদৰ চ' এইদৰে তেওঁ নৈতিক তত্ত্বৰ দুটা প্ৰধান চিন্তা আৰু প্ৰধান কাণ্টিয়ান পৰম্পৰা এই তেওঁলোকৰ দুটাই তেওঁলোকে ধৰা একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে আৰু ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটি আৰু উপযোগিতাবাদী চ' হাৰৰ যিটো বিধানবাদৰ সংস্কৰণ কোৱা হৈছিলে যে নৈতিক বিচাৰি কেৱল অনুভৱৰ বৰ্ণনা আৰু প্ৰকাশ কৰাতকে নিৰ্ধাৰিত কৰে তেওঁ এইটো যুক্তিৰ জৰিয়তে তেওঁ বুজাই দিছিলে চ' নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ মতে কি হ'ল নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ মতে মেইনলি কাণ্ট এণ্ড ইমাজিনকে বেছিকে গুৰুত্ব দিয়া হৈছিলে ইথিকেল যিটো প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম আছিলে এইটোতে আছিলে দ্য মেটা ইথিকেল থিয়ৰী ডেট মৰেল ষ্টেটমেণ্টছ আৰ কমাণ্ডছ অৰ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম ডেট ডমেইন মেটা ইথিকেল থিয়ৰীৰ লগতে মৰেল ষ্টেটমেণ্টছৰো কমাণ্ড কৰিছিলে আকৌ ইথিকেল প্ৰিজাৰ্ভেশ্যনত ডেফিনেশ্যন সুগাৰ ডেফিনেশ্যন এণ্ড এইখিনি এক্সাম্পলৰ আলোচনা কৰা হৈছিলে যে তাৰপিছত কে ফিচাৰ্ছ এক্সাম্পল হ'ল কি যদি a moral statement like don't steal is a proposition that would not have everything so এক্সাম্পলৰ জৰিয়তে যদি আমি কিছুমান বস্তু ক'লে যে don't steal ক'ব পাৰোঁ যে don't steal that means what is it you ought not to be steal this কিছুমান যেনেকা as an example that meat are not good for health this lines is equal to নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ মতে কি equal to প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে চ' যিয়ে কোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিবেচনা কৰে তেওঁ প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক কৰিব পাৰে যিয়ে কোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিবেচনা কৰে আৰু তেওঁ প্ৰাসংগিকতাৰ বাবে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক বিবেচনা বুলি প্ৰাসংগিকতাভাৱে অনুৰোধ দিয়ে কোনো কামক তাকে কি বুলি কোৱা হয় যি অনুৰূপ প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব লাগিব চ' ধাৰণাটোৱে ইউনিভাৰ্চেল কাণ্টৰ দ্বাৰা প্ৰভাৱিত হ'ব পাৰে এইটো বিকজ ধাৰণাৰ ওপৰত কাণ্টেও কিছুমান বস্তু ডিছকাছ কৰিছিলে যিটোৰ জৰিয়তে আমি এইটো ক'ব পাৰোঁ চ' হেয়াৰ ভাৰ্চন অফ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম এইটো হোল্ড কৰিছিলে যে moral judgments prescribed and descriptive elements of moral statements are varies from culture to culture. Descriptive elements are from varies from culture to culture. So ধাৰণাটোৰ যিটো হৰাৰ বিধানসভাৰ নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ বৰ্ণনাত্মক যি উপাদান আছিলে এইটো সংস্কৃত ভেদে বা ব্যক্তিভেদে ভিন্ন হৈছিলে চ' এই উপাদানটোৱে ব্যক্তি সময় স্থান নিৰ্দিষ্ট এইবোৰৰ এটা হৈছিলে এই উপাদানটোৱে ব্যক্তি সময় স্থান নিৰ্দিষ্ট আৰু আনহাতে নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ যি নিৰ্দেশনামূলক উপাদানক স্থিতি হয় এইখিনি এটা নৈতিকতাৰ বক্তব্য নিৰ্দেশনাত্মক উপাদান হয় চ' এই উপাদান এইটো উপাদানৰ ব্যক্তি হ'ল উপাদানৰ সংস্কৃতিভেদে যিটো আৰু ব্যক্তিভেদে ভিন্ন হয় যদি সংস্কৃতিৰ ওপৰত যাওঁ আমি সেইটো এটা হ'ব আকৌ যদি আমি ব্যক্তিৰ ওপৰতে যাওঁ তেনেহ'লে সেইটো এটা হ'ব চ' এই উপাদানটো ব্যক্তি সময় স্থান নিৰ্দিষ্ট এই দুটাৰ ওপৰতে প্ৰযোজ্য হয় চ' আনহাতে নৈতিক বক্তব্যবোৰ যদি আমি নিৰ্দেশনামূলকভাৱে দিওঁ তেনেহ'লে উপাদান কৰোঁতে উপাদানৰ নিৰন্তৰেৰে প্ৰকৃতিৰ হয় চ' সেইবাবেই নিৰ্দেশনাবাদে নৈতিক যিটো মতানৈক্য হয় আৰু নৈতিকতাৰ যি ভিত্তি হয় এইটো গঢ়ি তোলে বিচাৰ কৰে চ' অট'মেটিকেলি ইয়াতে যি যেহেতু ইয়াতে হেয়াৰ্ছৰ কিছুমান কোৰ্চ প্ৰিন্সিপলো আছে and years illustrated and developed a prescriptivism here is into illustrate and development prescriptivism কৰিছিলে এইটোৰ জৰিয়তে তাতে কিছুমান নিৰ্দেশনাবাদে নৈতিক যি কিছুমান ফিলচফাৰসকলে বেলেগ বেলেগ নৈতিক দিয়ে যিটো এইটো নিৰ্দেশনামূলক উপাদান খণ্ডে and introduction to seeds of prescriptivism is the philosophy of Socrates, Aristotle সকলোৰ ওপৰতে ডিছকাশ্যনৰ এইটো ওপৰতে আহি গ'ল এই বস্তুটো ইয়াৰ যিটো এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চ আছিলে এইখিনি এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চেছ অব্লিগেটৰী তাৰ নেচাৰ আৰু হেল্পছ পিপুল টু বিং মৰেল বিং তাৰ নেচাৰ অফ নিৰন্তন প্ৰকৃতিৰ হয় সেইবোৰেই নিৰ্দেশনাবাদে নৈতিক মতানৈক্য আৰু নৈতিকতা উদ্দেশ্য নৈতিকতাৰ ভিত্তি কৰি তোলে চ' ইয়াতে আমি ইন্ট্ৰডাকশ্যনটো পালোঁ আৰু ডেফিনিশ্যনখিনি চ' দ্য চিগনিফিকেঞ্চ অফ দ্য প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম ইন মৰেল ফিল'চফি চিগনিফিকেঞ্চ অফ দ্য প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভ মিৰাৰছে আমি এইটো অলপ দীঘলীয়া চেপ্টাৰ আছে যিখিনি আমি লাষ্টৰ পাৰ্টত আলোচনা কৰিম এইটো যি এতিয়া আলোচনা কৰি আছিলোঁ কিন্তু ডেফিনেশ্যন অফ প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজম এয়াৰ চ' ইয়াতে যি বৰ্ণনাত্মক যিবোৰ উপাদান আছে এইবোৰ গোটেই আমি পইণ্ট কৰি লৈ ল'ম লাষ্টত 2-3 দিন বাছ দেন নৈতিক বক্তব্যৰ যিটো বৰ্ণনাত্মক উপাদান হ'ব এইখিনি সংস্কৃতিভেদে বা ব্যক্তিভেদেও ভিন্ন হয় চ' এই উপাদানটো ব্যক্তি সময় স্থান নিৰ্দিষ্ট আনহাতে নৈতিক বস্তু বা বক্তব্য নৈতিক বক্তব্যবোৰ নিৰ্দেশনামূলক প্ৰকৃতিৰ ৰূপান্তৰ প্ৰকৃতিৰ চ' কিন্তু সেইবাবেই নিৰ্দেশনাবাদে নৈতিক মতানৈক্য আৰু নৈতিকতাৰ ভিত্তি গঢ়ি তুলিব বিচাৰে সেইটো কাৰণেই তেওঁলোকে নিজৰ মতানৈক্য আৰু নিজৰ বিচাৰ নিৰ্দেশনাবাদৰ নৈতিক মতানৈক্য আৰু নৈতিকতাৰ যি ভিত্তি আছে এইটো গঢ়ি উঠিলে তাৰপিছত হাৰেৰ মতে বিধানসভাৰ যি সংস্কৰণ মানে পুনৰ যিবিলাক ভুল আছিলে এইখিনি সংস্কৰণ কৰি আকৌ যিটো ফিলচফিৰ পাৰ্ট ওলাইছিলে এইখিনি হ'ল কি মেগনেচিয়াছ তেওঁ হাৰে এইটো যুক্তিৰ আগবঢ়াই যে নৈতিক যিবিলাক বিধানসমূহ আছিলে নীতিৰ নিয়মৰ বা অনৈতিক যিবিলাক বিধানৰ পৰা পূৰ্বটোৰ যিদৰে পৃথক বৈশিষ্ট্য আৰু আলোচনা বৈশিষ্ট্য দ্বাৰা ইউনিভাৰ্চেল লাইজিবিলিটি যিয়ে কোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিবেচনা নকৰে ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটি কিছুমান কাম আছে পুনৰ লৈ এইটো শেষ হ'ব নোৱাৰে পূৰ্বটোৰ যিদৰে পৃথক বৈশিষ্ট্য যুক্ত দ্বাৰা হয় এইটো আকৌ নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিবেচনাও কৰে কিন্তু যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব লাগিব চ' এই ধাৰণাটো ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটিৰ দ্বাৰা প্ৰভাৱিত হ'ব চ' ডেট মিনছ হোৱাট কিছুমান এইটো থিয়ৰিত আছিলে প্ৰিন্সিপল অফ ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটি হুইচ ৰিকুৱাৰ্ছ ডেট মৰেল guide sections and more decision of facts চ' ইয়াতে কিছুমান বস্তু আকৌ আছে যিবোৰ বিমে হেয়াৰ্ছ ইউনিভাৰ্চেল স্ক্ৰিপ্টৰ এইটো তেওঁ কৈছিলে এইটো হ'ল কি এটা মেটা ইথিকেল থিয়ৰি এণ্ড that posits moral judgments are both processive এইটো প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ লগত মেটা ইথিকেলৰ যিটো ৰিলেশ্যন এইটো আছে চ' ইয়াতে চাপ'জ এজনে মাংস এজনে খাই আছে চ' আই কুড চে ডেট দিছ মিট ইজ বেড ফৰ হেল্থ বাট তেওঁ আকৌ ঘৰত গৈ কি কৰিলে তেওঁ চিকেন খাই আছে চ' ডেট মিনছ হোৱাট অট'মেটিকেলি এইটো এটা বস্তু হয় যিটো নিজে নিজৰ যিটো ডেছক্ৰিপশ্যন অনুযায়ী তেওঁলোকৰ যিটো ষ্টেটমেণ্ট আছিলে এইখিনি প্ৰকৃততে বিধানসমূহৰ অনৈতিক বিধানৰ পৰাহে পৃথক কৰা হৈছিলে চ' Prescriptivism is the belief that there are correct and incorrect ways to use language, and prescriptivism uh, language, so that explicit rules and the variants. Hmm. So, in linguistics, it means that imposing rules on language use, while in either the refers to the view that true moral statements guide behavior, but prescripting over people. এতিয়া এইটো বস্তু কোনোবা মই নকৰোঁ, মই নকৰাৰ এটা বস্তু যদি আমি ধাৰণা কৰাৰ পিছত এইটো কৰিবলৈ বিচাৰোঁ, then we have to keep our mind pura universe strict on that matter. নৈতিকভাৱে আমি এটা ভাল বুলি বিবেচনা কৰিহে তাৰ পিছতহে আমি এইটো কামত লাগিব পাৰোঁ, বাট আগৰ পৰা এইটো কাম কৰিব নোৱাৰোঁ। চ' তেওঁ প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপভাৱে যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব পাৰে। ডেট মিনছ হোৱাট, তুমি তেওঁ প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক তেওঁ গুৰুত্বৰ বাবে আৰু যি নৈতিকতাৰ বাবে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব লাগিব। চ' এই ধাৰণাটো ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজৰ ধাৰা বা হাড়েৰ বিধানসভাৰ যিবিলাক তেওঁলোকে আছিলে, এইখিনিতো তেওঁ বেলেগ বেলেগ নিজৰ ভিউজ দি এইটো কেনেকা অনৈতিক বিধানৰ পৰা এইটো বিধানলৈ লৈ যাব পাৰিব এইটো বিচাৰে। চ' প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামৰ নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰাটো সাজু হ'ব পাৰে। ডেট মিনছ হোৱাট, ধাৰণাটোৰ ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজৰ কাৰ্ডৰ ভিতৰতে এইটো কি কোনো নৈতিক কামৰ লগতে এইটো ৰিলেটেড হৈ আছে। So in linguistics, it means ki imposing rules on language also, while in ethics it with language. Here কি কৰিছিল, এটা significant figure দিছিলে contemporary moral philosophy known as developmental universal in the prison. So that means what? Universalized prescriptions are universal, and universalized prescription emphasizing that women one suppose আমি stress লৈছো that X is good but in X is not good, আমি আমি যিকোনো বস্তু এটা নিজৰ ওপৰতে যেনেকা জাজমেণ্টত লৈ কৰিব পাৰোঁ, চেম ভিউটো আমি যেতিয়া জাজমেণ্টটো প্ৰকাশ কৰিম, চেম ভিউটো আমি বেলেগৰ যেতিয়া ট্ৰাষ্টৰ ৰিপৰ্ট হ'ব সেই সময়তে আমি দুটাই একেলগতে কৰিব পাৰোঁ। চ' ডেট মিনছ হোৱাট, ইয়াতে যিটো নৈতিকভাৱে আমি যিটো ভাল বিবেচনা কৰি আছোঁ সেইটো প্ৰকৃতকেই গুড বুলি আমি ভাবিব লাগিব। চ' ইয়াতে তেওঁ আৰু যুক্তি বঢ়ায় যে নৈতিক বিধানসমূহত অনৈতিক বিধানৰ পৰা যুক্তি তেওঁ আগবঢ়াইছিলে, আৰু তেওঁৰ আনইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটিৰ যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলিও বিবেচনা কৰে। চ' তেওঁ প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ কিছুমান যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব লাগিব। চ' নট অনলি প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে নৈতিকভাৱে আমি কি হ'ব লাগিব, ভাল হ'ব লাগিব যিকোনো পইণ্টছত। চ' দেটছ ৱাই যদি আমি কোনোবা বস্তু চাপ'জ ফিছ চিকেনছ আৰ নট চিকেনছ ডোণ্ট টেক চিকেনছ দিজ আৰ নট গুড, এইটোতকৈ আমি কোৱাতকৈ ডাইৰেক্টলি নিৰ্দেশ দিব পাৰোঁ কি যে ডোণ্ট বাই চিকেন বিকজ ইটছ গুড নট গুড। চ' তেনেকুৱা আমি কৰিব পাৰোঁ। চ' যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে বা নৈতিকভাৱে যিটো বিচাৰ কৰে সেই প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিব পাৰোঁ। So ইয়াৰৰ মতে কি আছিলে moral philosophy যিটো profiles আছিলে writers আছিলে on economic sense more he is influenced by এতিয়া ইয়াতে এটা জেনাৰেল প্ৰিন্সিপল থাকিব পাৰে যেনেকা a general moral principle consists of two factors the general principles of moral truth and the rationality in morality can be used to understand it. And the rationality in morality can be easily understood when the understood into future shares or moral judgment হয় যেতিয়া prescriptivity বা universality দুটাই হ'ব তেতিয়াও এইটো এটা জেনাৰেল মৰেল প্ৰিন্সিপল কনচিষ্ট হ'ব পাৰে চ' এই দুটাৰ মাজতে প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব লাগিব চ' ধাৰণাটো হ'ল কি ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটি আৰু কাণ্টৰ দ্বাৰা প্ৰভাৱিত হ'ব পাৰে এইটো এবাৰ মেনশ্যন এইটো এটা এক্সাম্পল হ'ব পাৰে যেনেকা A owes money to B and B owes money to C. So এইটো এটা ক্ৰেডিটৰ হ'ব পাৰে যে তেওঁলোকে ধাৰ নোলোৱাকে কি কৰিলে দুজনে বি আস্ক হিমসেলফ কেন আই সে দা মানি টু দেন হোৱাট তাৰ মাজত আকৌ সাপোজ anyone who is on my position ought to be debtor in prison তিনজনে এজনে এ কেতিয়াও এ বেৰ পৰা মানি ললে আকৌ বি এ কাৰ পৰা ললে চিৰ পৰা ললে that means what এতিয়া এইটো So B asked himself, can I say that I ought to make this measurement again? এইটো এটা এক্সাম্পল হয় যেনেকা নৈতিকতাৰ মাজতে গৈ এইটো ইয়াতে দুটাই দেখাব পাৰিছে এটা হ'ল কি ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটি এণ্ড এটা হ'ল ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটি এণ্ড এটা হ'ল কি মানে prescriptibility. So the prescriptibility এটা universalizability এইটো মেইন কাণ্টৰ ডেফিনেশ্যনটো ভাল লাগিছে বাট ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটি এইটো এটা হ'ল যিটো বিধানবাদৰ সংস্কৰণ কৰা হৈছে কিন্তু অৰ্থ যি নৈতিক ভাল বুলি বিচৰা চ' তেওঁ প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচাৰ কৰিবলৈ সাজু হ'ব লাগিব চাই দিলে যে মৰেল জাজমেণ্ট ইজ বাট ইফ হি ইজ নট যদি কোনোবাই এইটো ইউনিভাৰ্চেলিটি হওক বা প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যন এইটো যদি কমনলি হাইলাইট কৰিব নোৱাৰে দেন এইটোক লৈ আকৌ কি পেন ইন হিজ আৰ্টিকল বি এম ফাৰ আলোচনা কৰিলে যে হি আৰ্গুজ দ্যাট প্ৰেছক্ৰিপশ্যন লেংগুৱেজ হেজ এ লজিকেল structure and it follows he argues that prescriptive language has a logical structure and it follows rational frameworking of তেওঁ কৈছিলে যে এইটো এটা কি হয় লজিকেল ষ্ট্ৰাকচাৰ হয় এইটো এটা ফ্ৰেমিং হ'ব লাগিব ৰাসায়নিকৰ ওপৰত চ' প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ যিকোনো কামক নৈতিকভাৱে ভাল বুলি বিচৰা নৈতিক অংগ এণ্ড প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে অনুৰূপ বা যিকোনো বুলি বিবেচনা কৰিব পাৰে চ' তেওঁলোকে প্ৰাসংগিকভাৱে বুলি বিবেচনা কৰিছে সাজু হ'ব লাগিব চ' ধাৰণাটোৰ ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজেবিলিটিৰ কাউণ্টৰ দ্বাৰা প্ৰভাৱিত কৰে এইটো চ' হাৰে ভাবে যে নৈতিক আপেক্ষিকতা ভাৱৰ এৰাই চলি আৰু নৈতিক দাবীৰ যুক্তিসংগত যিটো ন্যায্যতা হয় এইটো প্ৰদানৰ ভিত্তি প্ৰদান কৰিহে নৈতিক প্ৰদান কৰিহে এইটো দাবীৰ যুক্তিসংগতা ন্যায্যতা বা প্ৰদানৰ ভিত্তি প্ৰদান কৰিহে নৈতিক বিচাৰ বিবেচনাই কাৰ্য পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন ধৰণেৰে নিৰ্দেশাবাদক সৰ্বোত্তমবাদে ধৰা পৰে সঁচাকৈহে তেওঁ যুক্তি দিছিল যে একমাত্ৰ যুক্তিবাদী নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী হ'ল যুক্তিবাদী নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী হ'ল কি এইটো এটা এক প্ৰকাৰৰ উপযোগিতাবাদ আৰু এইদৰে তেওঁ নৈতিক তত্ত্বৰ দুটা প্ৰধান চিন্তা অৰ্থাৎ কাণ্টিয়ান যিটো পৰম্পৰা আছে কাণ্টৰ মতে যিবিলাক পৰম্পৰা চলি আছিলে এইটোৰ যিটো পৰম্পৰা আৰু তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটো এইটো ধৰি পেলাইছিলে আৰু তেওঁ একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে দুটাই ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি কোনখিনিতে তেওঁলোকে এইটো মিক্স আপ কৰিছিলে এইটো এতিয়ালৈকেও তেনেকাই চলি আছে এইদৰে সেইটো কাৰণে যুক্তিবাদী যিটো নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী হয় এইটোৰ এক প্ৰকাৰৰ উপযোগিতাবাদ বুলিও আমি ক'ব পাৰোঁ চ' তেনেকা নৈতিক তত্ত্বৰ দুটি প্ৰধান চিন্তা বা কাণ্টিয়ান পৰম্পৰা দুটাই ধৰা হ'ল কি দুটাৰ মাজতে হ'ল একমাত্ৰ যুক্তিবাদী নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগীতাৰ হ'ল এইটো এক প্ৰকাৰৰ উপযোগিতাবাদ আৰু এইদৰে তেওঁ নৈতিক তত্ত্বৰ দুটা প্ৰধান চিন্তা বা কাণ্টিয়ান পৰম্পৰাৰো ধৰা পেলাইছিলে একত্ৰিত কৰিহে ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটি এণ্ড উপযোগিতাবাদ এইটো ধৰা পেলাইছিলে চ' এতিয়া আমি কিছুমান পইণ্টছ আছে যেনেকা ইয়াতে philosophical views and conclusion philosophical views of আমি এইটো কালি নেক্সট ডে কালি এইটো কমপ্লিট কৰিম philosophical views there are just once you please all এইখিনি philosophical views to কনক্লুশ্যনলৈকে আমি নেক্সট ডে কালি মানে আলোচনা কৰিম তেতিয়া এইখিনি এইটো চেপ্টাৰৰ শেষ হ'ব তেতিয়া চ' যদি হয় once please you read the lines so the significance of the so প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ মৰেল ফিলচফি যিটো নৈতিক দৰ্শন যিবিলাক নৈতিক দৰ্শনত কি আছে মেক্সিমাম নৈতিকতাৰ ওপৰতে বেছড আৰু নৈতিক যিবোৰ নীতি নিয়ম আছে এইখিনিও যথেষ্ট এটা ছিগনিফিকেঞ্চ বা প্ৰেছক্ৰিপটিভিজমৰ সৈতে মৰেল ফিলচফিৰ লগত ৰিলেটেড হৈ আছে মৰেল ফিলচফি মিনছ যিবিলাক নৈতিকতা আমি মেণ্টেলি যিখিনি বস্তু আমি ভাল বুলি জানো এইখিনি চ' ইয়াৰ মাজতেও হাৰে ভাবে হাৰ মানে কোন ৰাইটাৰ হি ৱাজ ফিলচফাৰ হাৰে ভাবিছিলে যে নৈতিক আপেক্ষিক মনৰ কি হৈছিলে যিটো সঁচাকৈয়ে তেওঁ যুক্তি দিছিল আৰু একমাত্ৰ যুক্তিবাদী যোনটো নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী হ'ল এক প্ৰকাৰৰ উপযোগিতাবাদ এইদৰে তেওঁ নৈতিক তত্ত্বৰ দুটা প্ৰধান চিন্তা বা কাণ্টিয়ান পৰম্পৰা তেওঁৰ ধাৰণাটোৱে ধৰা পেলাইছিলে একত্ৰিত কৰিছিলে ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটি আৰু উপযোগিতাবাদ এইটো চ' হাৰে ভাবে যে নৈতিক আপেক্ষিকতাবাদৰ এৰাই চলি আৰু নৈতিক দাবীৰ যুক্তি প্ৰসংগ কৰিছিলে চ' সঁচাকৈয়ে তেওঁ এইটো যুক্তি দিছিলে যে একমাত্ৰ যুক্তিবাদী নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী হ'ল এক প্ৰকাৰৰ উপযোগিতাবাদ আৰু একেদৰে যুক্তি তেওঁ এইটো একমাত্ৰ যুক্তিবাদী নৈতিক দৃষ্টিভংগী হ'ল এক প্ৰকাৰৰ উপযোগিতাবাদ চ' এইদৰে তেওঁ তত্ত্বৰ মানে যি দুটা মেইন প্ৰধান চিন্তা আছিলে এইটো অৰ্থাৎ কাণ্টিয়ান পৰম্পৰা আৰু একত্ৰিত কৰি ইউনিভাৰ্চেলাইজিবিলিটি আৰু উপযোগিতাবাদী এইটো আলোচনা কৰি দিছিল দুটাই আছিলে এই দুটাই আছিলে মেইন পইণ্টছ হাৰৰ significance of the version of prescriptivism holds আপেক্ষিকতাবাদত So, Kantian tradition of the notion universalization আৰু universal he brought to him book. So, ইয়াতে illustrated and developed prescriptivismৰ যে writings আছিলে তাৰ মাজতে language of morals এইখিনি আলোচনা কৰা হৈছিলে আৰু ইয়াৰ philosophical views and conclusion খিনি আমি next day আলোচনা কৰিম কালি. Thank you. নমস্কাৰ.